Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. My name is Vince D'Addario. That guy over there is Brian Driscoll. And today, folks, it's the best day of the week. And it's Friday. And that means that it's the Friday free-for-all mailbag. Haven't been on in a while. Very excited to be on for a Friday free-for-all mailbag. It's my favorite show of the week. I have been lucky enough to be co-hosting like we used to do back in the day, Brian, all week long.
So the OG's back together.
I know, right? I'm sad that next week I have to go back to my regular day job and I have to bypass the 1 o'clock show.
I wish I could afford to keep you from that job so you could do more stuff here, but
it is what it is.
We're not rolling like that just yet.
Right.
I still can't match government pay.
I guess it is government pay, isn't it? Yes. So today we're going to answer your questions. You guys dictate the show. There may or may not be some breaking news while we are on the air. If that is the case, then we will, of course, discuss it. But we are driven by your questions. And so with that said, Brian, you ready to rock and roll?
Dude, I'm always ready. Yes.
I love it. All right.
So
Jack,
hold on. It's live. Go with it. It happened. Thomas Harper just committed to Notre Dame, the Oklahoma State DB. So just go ahead and quickly say that, and then I'm going to publish the story.
All right. So I was like, wait.
We knew it was going to happen around 1. I just wasn't sure it was going to happen like.
So he actually did it on time. That's
yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Wasn't expecting that. So safety from Oklahoma State.
Safety nickel.
Yeah, safety nickel. That's a good point. So he was on campus the last couple of days, right? And he has decided to pledge his allegiance to Notre Dame, and that is official as of 1:05 p.m. And, of course, we are going to talk about him and what his film looks like and how he can help Notre Dame. Thomas Harper is his name. He is, again, a safety / nickel, a place where Notre Dame needed a body, in my opinion. And obviously we're going to talk about that. But that's an exciting get for Notre Dame. I know you've dove into the film a little bit more than I have at this point. But
and I'll have more. I'll have more on him, Vince. But let me just kind of finish putting this up here real quick.
No, you're good.
I can't talk and type at the same time.
No, you're good. So I think it is exciting for Notre Dame because that is a spot of need. I mean, that is a spot from a depth chart standpoint that they needed to bring in some experience.
Yeah, here's the intriguing thing about him, Vince. So, number one, he's a guy that's going to come in and compete for jobs. He's not like this isn't like getting Sam Hartman, right? Meaning you've got this really established, 4-year starter, whatever the kind of guy, but he's been a 4-year player at Oklahoma State. So technically he should be done. He's in a very similar situation to what Tariq Bracy was last year in that he played as a freshman. He was part of the 2019 class at Oklahoma State, played as a freshman, played in 7 games, at least 7 games every year of his career. So he never took a red shirt. But because of the 2020 COVID year, he has a 5th year of eligibility remaining.
Yep.
So, he's got a good chunk of experience. Missed part of this season with a bit of a shoulder injury. I did some research on that, talked to some sources. Sounds like it was nothing major. And he's part of a kind of a mass exodus from the Oklahoma State program, which is really kind of sad and disappointing, to be honest with you. We're seeing this from some of these programs that aren't the blue bloods of college football, but it is what it is. But he's a unique player, Vince, because in his career, he's played a lot of nickel, like the slot nickel spot that Tariq Bracy has played. But he's more of a safety in that regard. Like he can play. He's a cover guy, but he's more of a safety. He's also played some free safety, some alley safety, some box safety during his career as well. And he's played a little bit more nickel throughout his career. Played a lot more nickel this year than he did in the past, where he was a little bit more split in snaps in the past. So the interesting thing about him, Vince, is you're getting a guy that is kind of a 2 birds with 1 stone type of player, in that he can play the spot that Brandon Joseph departed. He can provide depth at safety in the base defense, and then he can play nickel in the nickel defense.
Right.
And so he kind of gives you depth at 2 positions with 1 scholarship. Now, obviously, when they're in the nickel, if he is the starting nickel, then you're not going to play him at safety if you're going to spend the whole game in nickel. But it does give you that option because Notre Dame's going to play in their base defense a decent amount this year, Vince, that it gives you sort of an opportunity to have a guy that's going to play some nickel as well. So, but can also play safety in the base defense, I mean. So it makes a good pickup. I'll dive more into the film. What I've seen so far, Vince, I see a kid that's got good size for the position. He's listed at 5'11". He's a $108, listed at 5'11". I think 180 is what I saw. Pretty cut up kid, pretty ripped up kid. Good tackler. That's the first thing that stands out. He's a really good open field tackler, in my opinion. And he's a guy that brings a little bit more physicality to the position. Now, the thing about Tariq Bracy, just so people understand where I'm coming from, Tariq Bracy was a more than willing tackler, especially this past year. I mean, he was really willing, but he's undersized. And there's only so much you can do when you're as thin and skinny as Tariq Bracy is. So it's not that Tariq wasn't a good tackler or a willing tackler. What this is more about to me, Vince, is a guy that brings just a little bit more beef to the position. Even though the listed weight isn't that much better, he just brings a little bit more thickness to the position, in my opinion. A little bit more solid play. He's been a solid tackler throughout his career, not a lights out, light you up guy, but a really good in space tackler, in my opinion. So that's important for that nickel position. It's also important for safety. Brings good coverage ability. So the last 2 years, this year he gave up 9.7 yards per attempt, and he played mostly in the slot as a nickel. Now, Tariq Bracy in that position for Notre Dame gave up 10.6 yards per attempt. You and I would both agree, and I would hope everyone in the chat would agree, that Tariq Bracy was really good for Notre Dame this year. He was a really good football player. So his 10.6 yards per attempt is pretty good. And this kid gave up about a full yard less. Last year in 11 games last season, Vince, he only allowed 5.8 yards per attempt allowed. So, he brings some good coverage ability to that position. And that's obviously something that they're looking for, because that was a concern, because you got like Jaden Mickey and some other guys, but there's like a natural nickel coming back. There's not a natural slot guy coming back.
Right.
And my hope, I'll be honest with you, my hope is that he comes in and locks down the slot nickel position. And here's why. Because if he locks down the slot nickel position, and you've got Jaden Mickey, Cam Hart, and Benjamin Morrison outside, and then Chance Tucker emerges, and I'm going to have something on Chance Tucker here soon on irishbreakdown.com, then there's even more reason to move Clarence Lewis to safety, which is something I don't think the Notre Dame coaching staff is really thinking about doing right now. I think they're going to need to be forced to do that by other guys stepping up. And I think this addition could be one of those things that forces them to say, hey, look, this kid's a slot. We're going to play Ohio State, USC, Clemson, Duke. A lot of teams the best teams Notre Dame's going to play this year are going to spread it out teams. Pitt's going to look a lot like what Boston Colleges looked like, right? So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for nickel there. So you look at your schedule, Vince. The guy at Sacramento State that is now the head coach of Stanford, the way that they run their offense, much more of a nickel need for there, as opposed to where they were two tight ends and big personnel in the past. So your schedule is going to require a lot more nickel from your defense, which means this kid will play more. And if this kid earns that job, you're going to need to have a third safety working in there and potentially a fourth safety. My hope is that they decide to move Clarence Lewis back to safety. Is my hope.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's the plan right now, but this maybe could help with that, in my opinion, Vince.
No, I love the positional flexibility with this kid. Obviously, he brings experience to the secondary. I mean, there's still a young secondary overall. I mean, if you think about it,
playing
Cam
experience.
Hart, playing experience-wise. And Cam Hart's your most experienced guy coming back. But I like bringing more experience, and I have no problem with that. His positional flexibility is key. I don't know that Jaden Mickey is a natural nickel, kind of what you hinted at, right? And I love the kid. I think he can play and be very good with this defense. I just don't know that he's a natural nickel. So is he the guy that you want starting in that spot? I don't know. Maybe he takes that on in the offseason.
Right. He's not a natural nickel because he's never done it. So we don't know if he can transition there or not.
No, that's a good point. And,
Right.
He struggled this year, but he's a true freshman who'd never played the position. So I think the expectations needed to be, tampered down a little bit based on his history at the position, right? So I like this, bringing in some experience. I like your ideas about him at nickel. I think physically he fits that role a lot better. And then it allows Jaden Mickey to rotate in on the outside as opposed to the inside. Now, Jaden Mickey could also be a kid who cross-trains at, regular corner and nickel. I have no problem with that. You're going to have to move some guys around. But even this year, they started out in the nickel. That was basically their base defense this year was the nickel. I mean, more often than not. And you're going to see that even more so next year is the nickel. And so that's going to be a situation where I like it. I like the positional flexibility. I like the fact that he's coming in. He's got 4 years of experience. 4 years of experience. Nobody else on this defense in the secondary has 4 years of experience. And now you're looking at a potential starting lineup of Benjamin Morrison, Cam Hart on the outside. You got this kid on the inside at nickel. Then you've got Xavier Watts in the back. And then whoever they have at safety, at the other safety, whether it's Ramon Henderson, whether it's another kid that they're going to bring in from the transfer portal, whatever the case may be, I like where this secondary is. This secondary a year ago was a giant question mark going into the season. It's not a giant question mark anymore. It's arguably the position group on the defense that you have the most excitement about, that you have the most confidence in. At least I do. This is a lockdown secondary at the moment, especially if they can, if they can move Clarence Lewis. I would love to see a starting lineup of Morrison, Watts, Lewis, Hart, and then you bring in Thomas Harper at the nickel. That's a pretty formidable group, if you ask me. And that's a group that I can get on board with from a secondary situation. So this is an exciting group. I think the addition of Harper not only makes you better from an on-field perspective, but from an experience perspective. I think that Notre Dame zeroed in on him pretty early in the process, and they knew that that's a guy that they wanted. That makes me excited as well because, who's your corners coach? Coach Mickens is your corners coach, and Coach Mickens has a track record of not only bringing in good talent and developing it, but also identifying talent and bringing it in. And if he signed off on this kid and he thinks that this kid can play at Notre Dame on the defensive side of the ball, in the secondary, at safety or at corner, I'm good. Like that works for me. I am totally good with that. And then you add in Coach O'Leary on top of it, and where you are with what he's done at the safety position. If Coach O'Leary and Coach Mickens are on board bringing the Harper kid in, then I am 100% on board with it as well. I am very excited about what this secondary can be. I am very excited about what this secondary is currently going into the year. And they're only going to get better from January 6th till the beginning of the year and then beyond. I got to tell you, man, I'm kind of excited about the fact that this fivesome is going to be the starters at Notre Dame in the secondary. This is an exciting place to be. And then you look at Jaden Mickey being one of the first guys off the bench. You look at Chance Tucker being another guy off the bench who can come in and do some things. And, of course, Brian is going to have a story about Chance Tucker coming up here on irishbreakdown.com here very soon. So he's going to give you a little bit of insight as to why Chance Tucker is the guy. So, look, bottom line, this is a very exciting time to be a Notre Dame fan if you are a fan of defense. There's talent. There's experience. There is proven talent that is going to be in that secondary, and that is just super exciting. I haven't been this excited about an entire secondary at Notre Dame in a really, really long time, and that's the bottom line. I've been excited about a player here, a player there. Obviously, you look at Hamilton, you look at Love. Those guys are obviously exciting. Love's playing safety now in the NFL, right? Kyle Hamilton was a first-round draft pick. Those guys are all exciting. But now you've got a full secondary to work with, and that part is exciting. So, again, breaking news that Thomas Harper from Oklahoma State, he's a grad transfer. He has transferred and committed to Notre Dame. He is a 4-year starter at Oklahoma. He's a guy that has a ton of experience, can play well, could be a nickel, could be a safety. Brian projects him more of a nickel at this point than a safety, which I'm totally fine with because I think that fits what Notre Dame is going to want to do. And so this is exciting. So there it is. Oklahoma State transfer Thomas Harper has committed to the University of Notre Dame. So that's the breaking news that I was talking about as we started the show. And as we were getting started, I didn't realize it was going to go that quickly to the breaking news, but here we are. All right. So it is a Friday free-for-all mailbag, folks. So we are going to jump in to a few questions here. First, leading off is Jack with the super chat. Jack, thank you very, very much for the super chat. Hey, guys, have any of you been following the Damar Hamlin story this week? I don't think we really have a choice with how it is being covered. And given his progress, is this the greatest sports story in recent memory? I mean, it's a great story because he's healing and it sounds like he's going to make a recovery and all of that. So, of course, that is a good sports story. I don't know that it's the greatest sports story. It has crossed all lengths of, media, right? I mean, it's on the Today Show. It's on Good Morning America. It's on all the nightly news. It's obviously across sports, and all of that. I get all of that. That it has transcended sports. So in that regard, then yes, it is a big sports story. I don't know if it's a sports story. I mean, I don't know. Look, the bottom line is I'm excited that he is recovering. It was a tragedy at the moment. It's something that none of us obviously could have expected. And I was actually doing a live show when it was all going down. So I'm ecstatic that he is getting better and it has transcended sports media. So that's awesome. So welcome back, Brian.
How are you?
I'm great. All right. Let's see here. Next up on the list, we got a super chat here from Sky Shark 425. Thank you very much. Alfred Thayer Mahan started World War I. Fight me. This is all you, buddy.
I'd rather not. I don't know enough about that.
I tried to look him up briefly. Yeah. I know that he was a naval guy, wrote some books and things like that, but I don't know enough about him to fight you, Sky Shark. Yeah. I did teach U.S. history but we never got past the Civil War because that's how U.S. history was broken down in the class that I taught. So, he was
an American, so I assume that there's some sort of sort of conspiracy theory here kind of thing. I would imagine be very interesting to kind of hear the reason for that.
Yeah.
I'm always open to learn stuff that I don't know. I've never pretended to say that I'm an expert on every historical thing, but I would love to read it. I've still had this big old thick book on Ulysses S. Grant that I've been dying to read that I just haven't made time for, but I'm going to start. It's one of my New Year's resolutions. I want to start reading more. I used to read all the time.
Yeah. Well, you don't have really time when you're running an empire.
Yeah. That's why I'm trying to make some new hires so I can have some time to not do this 24/7. So, yeah. But,
all right. But thank you for the super chat, man. I think you
shoot me a DM and kind of, I would love to hear kind of what you're coming from on this one and kind of where you're coming from. It'd be very interesting to see that one. Vince, before you move on to the next question too. So just discussed a lot of different things on that phone call I just received. But one of the things I did hear is that little interesting nugget about Thomas Harper's situation. So apparently when he came to Notre Dame this week for his visit, so people know the window, there's a window that they created for portal kids to visit schools. And it's a short one. It's like from the 4th to like the 8th, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
And so he was on campus and he was going to go visit a couple other places, one of which was Florida State. And there was another place, but apparently during the visit, he was just like, and the staff was able to convince him to be like, hey, this is where it is. And he just decided that Notre Dame was it. Nice. So the original plan was he was actually going to take more visits, but during the trip, it was just like, no, this is the place to be. The message for how they're going to use him was really impactful. The fact that he's going to get a chance to compete for a starting job because he was kind of the starting nickel, but he was kind of a piece to the puzzle. Sure. He wanted a chance somewhere he could go somewhere and like be a guy there, but was also okay if the role came about that he was going to be a piece that it would help there. He would be able to help there too. So just all of it was a fit, academic fit, all that stuff. So this is a good pickup for Notre Dame. He's a native of Tennessee, I believe.
Okay.
So not a native Texan or like where a lot of are Oklahoma. He's a native of Tennessee, I believe. So, and his older brother Devin also played linebacker for Oklahoma State as well. So,
gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. All right.
Let's a little backstory on that one.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that's the best part about this recruiting stuff is the backstory. All right. Skylar ND, looking at the college football landscape next year, is there a dominant team? Is this another opportunity for Notre Dame to seize the moment? Schedule is tough, but it sets them up.
Yeah, and the schedule being tough, Vince, is one of those things where it means that Notre Dame doesn't have to. This is what a tough schedule does for Notre Dame. It means you don't have to be 12-0 to get to the playoff.
Right.
In 2021, Notre Dame needed to be 12-0 to get to the playoff. No question. In 2017, they just needed to have one loss. In 2015, they just basically needed to have one loss and don't crap your pants against Wake Forest and Boston College. Right? Like the schedules were set up in various years where a one-loss Notre Dame team gets in.
Right.
In that's just 2018, you needed to be undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a bunch of other really good one-loss teams, and your schedule overall wasn't that tough. You had a Michigan win, but like you couldn't have lost to Michigan or beaten Michigan and then lost to Syracuse or lost to Michigan and still got in most likely.
Right.
Just because there was other undefeated teams and things like that. This year, I believe a one-loss Notre Dame team, if like let's say they beat Ohio State and then lost to an upset in Cal in week 3 and then ran the table and beat USC and beat Clemson, Notre Dame's in the playoff.
Yes, agreed.
They are. They'd have got in over Ohio State and USC and Clemson.
Beat them. Yeah.
Because who were the 3 teams that were fighting for that last spot? 3 teams that Notre Dame played.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the unique aspect of it. Like Notre Dame going into the final week of the season, the 3 teams battling for the last weekend and then the college football, the championship weekend. So it's like the last 2 weekends. Clemson, USC, and Ohio State were the contenders for that 4th spot.
Yep.
Right. USC lost in the championship round. Clemson lost and they all 3 lost down the stretch. So that's how Ohio State kind of backed in.
Sure.
Well, if Notre Dame has a win over all 3 of those teams, but a loss to Stanford or Cal or something like that, guess what? They're in.
Yep.
And so it just depends on the year. I think next year, to Skylar's point, is going to be a year where it could be set up to where they don't have to be undefeated. Now, the other part of that is when there aren't dominant teams, it's harder for teams to go undefeated.
Sure.
I think. Like this year, you had, 2 undefeated teams, right? Michigan and Georgia was it. Yeah. Everybody else had a loss. One team got in without winning a conference championship. So you had that as well. So I think there's more parity coming to college football. I think, as we've said, Clemson's taking a little bit of a step back. Alabama's taking a little bit of a step back. We'll see if they can kind of take a step forward with this recruiting class they have coming in. But, that's kind of how I view it, Vince. I think that – and look, that's the reason – I wrote this article last night. I don't know if you had a chance to read it or not. But it was – this is why Notre Dame went after Sam Hartman. It's for one reason and one reason only. Yeah, because they think they have a chance to make a run. They have a couple pieces that they want to add through the portal. Some they added through recruiting high school kids. And they feel like if they can just make a little tweaks, quarterback being one, that whether it's Sam Hartman is a starter or Tyler Buchner has to beat out somebody really good. Because that's the thing is they didn't want to just roll with Tyler and him not have that competition of who's really challenging Tyler Buchner for the starting job next year?
Right.
If they don't bring in if they'd have brought in Keaton Slovis for depth, nobody's challenging Tyler Buchner for the starting job. And I don't know if that makes Tyler better.
Yeah.
Now, if Tyler's your starter next year, it's either because Sam got hurt or most likely because Tyler made huge gains and he's a great player, or Sam's the quarterback. Either way, you feel a lot better about you having really good quarterback play. And as the staff looks around, they're like, look, we got a great offensive line and the best offensive line coach in the business. We got a great running back room and the best running back coach in the business. Our receiving core is young but talented. Tight end room, young but talented. And we've got a guy that the head coach trusts a ton at that position. And then it's quarterback. I mean, that's the thing. It's like quarterback. That's the one position holding it back. So now you insert a guy like Sam Hartman, and you've got Tyler Buchner in that competition who's healthy, who you didn't have almost a whole year. And all of a sudden they feel like, no, we can now go out and compete. And so, that's why there's maybe people, develop Buckner and, take your lumps this year on 2023 and then get ready for 2024. They're looking at this like, no, we're going to make her. Oh, Alabama's got to replace their starting quarterback. Georgia's got to replace their starting quarterback. Ohio State's got to replace their starting quarterback. Like, why would we want to wait till next year? You know what I mean? Like, no, we're going to make our run now. And then we'll worry about making a run again in 2024.
Right.
That's the way that staff. And I love that. I love that about
absolutely. You kidding me? No doubt about it. Hulk Strongest. Hey guys, as a fan from Hawaii and seeing these Hawaii boys play for my favorite team is awesome. So do you guys think that Jordan Botelho turned the corner? And do you guys remember Jason Ching?
I do remember Jason Ching. He was a big-time recruit. It was in the 90s, I believe, maybe early 2000s. I have to remember when Jason Ching was coming out. But he was this parade All-American from Hawaii, defensive lineman, was supposed to be a really good player. Never panned out, but I remember hearing a lot about him because, I followed recruiting on the old magazine back in the day and all that. And I remember him. He was supposed to be a really, really good player. I'm going to try to see if I can look up when he was at Notre Dame because I don't remember when he came out. But, yeah, he was supposed to be a really, really good football player. Really good football player. Let me see if I can find this one here. He was there in the 90s. So he was one of those. He might have been 90s. Like Lou's last class or Davies' first around there. So he was a 96 grad. So that would have made him what part of that?
Well, that would have been the class of 96. So that
right. So that would have been Lou's last year, right?
I thought Lou left in 95.
I think Lou's last year was 1997. I believe.
Oh,
but I could be wrong.
You might be right about that.
I could be wrong. I'm just going to go look now. Yeah, Lou's last year at Notre Dame.
I'm not going to challenge you on Notre Dame trivia.
1996. His last year was 1996. Yes, so that would have been Lou's last class, Lou's last team. So Lou left. I guess 97 meaning the 97 season. So that's when Davey started. And then he was there for 5 years, 97 to 01. Then Ty took over in 02 for 3 years. And then Charlie took over in 05. And we all know the rest.
Yes, we do.
So, yeah. Yep.
All right, Benjamin, what small changes do you think the coaches need to make to have this team ready to go, fight for, and win a title?
Well, we kind of talked about, kind of the areas where they got to get better yesterday, right? And so I think improved quarterback play is one, whether it's Harper or Buckner, that's one. I think offensively, playing more to your skill, which is something we started to see in the bowl game. You're going to be more of a running back, receiver heavy team next year as opposed to tight end, dominant type of team next year. Not that the tight ends won't be good and productive. They will. It's just not going to be the kind of production we've seen in recent seasons. It's going to be
different. I mean, and anybody to expect differently is just not realistic. I mean, I'm just...
Right. Exactly. So I think those are things that I look at and I see kind of potential for that to look a lot different. I'm curious to see how Coach Reese, like one thing he's done a lot of in his tenure at head coach at Notre Dame is be a lot of heavy 12 personnel team. Mm-hmm. But when you think about it, his first offense at Notre Dame had 3 tight ends on it that are current starters in the National Football League, or, 2 of them are current starters in the National Football League. And the third one's about to be a first-round draft pick. When you think of 2020, they had Kevin Bauman, they had Tommy Tremble, and they had Michael Mayer. And Tommy Tremble didn't start most of the year, and he was a third-round draft pick. Brock Wright went undrafted, and he's currently starting for the Lions and playing well from what I can tell.
Yes, he
and
is.
What people tell me. You know what I mean? So, you understand it, because then who was your third receiver in 2020, right? Kevin Austin got hurt. Braden Lindsey was injured the whole year. There wasn't really that guy. Lawrence Keys was banged up that year. And so, ride your tight ends. Makes sense. 2021, it was more balanced, 11 personnel and 12 personnel. Why? Because you had Michael Mayer and then George Takis, but then there was a bit of a drop-off after that because you were young. And so, they did 12 personnel, but not a ton of it because the personnel better dictated more 11. So we saw a lot more Avery Davis and the 11 personnel stuff. This year, because of the quarterback situation, the roster needed more 12 and 13 personnel. So I do think Tom Reese likes to use the tight ends a lot. I think next year we're going to find out if he's dead set on doing it or not. Because we saw a good chunk of it in the bowl game, but nothing like we saw in the past. Like if we see the balance between 12 and 11 and 21, and we even saw a snap of 20 in that game, Vince, was just 2 running backs, 0 tight ends, 3 receivers. I love that formation. I like that more than 10 personnel because 10 personnel puts 4 receivers on the field. But I feel like if you got Audric Estime and Chris Tyree, or Audric Estime and pick another back in there in 20 personnel, you can move that Chris Tyree out, go 10 personnel, and be fine. Like from how you're lined up. But if you stay in that 20 personnel with Chris Tyree, you can also have Audric Estime as a lead blocker. You can use Chris Tyree as a smoke guy on motion. Difficult alignment to stop, Vince, because it forces you to expand the box. And, with a guy like Sam Hartman, if you're running some RPOs out of 20 personnel, good night.
I'd love to see more if you listen to the ESPN announcers, though, because Chris Tyree is a wide receiver who just lines up at running back at times.
I know. Like, all the time.
I couldn't help that one.
So I get it. It's frustrating.
All right. Okay. Brandon asks, is it necessary that Notre Dame finds a Viper in the portal now?
No, they're not looking for a Viper in the portal now. So I'm not going to get into it too much, but I don't think that there was ever necessarily a strong leaning towards Justin Ademilola coming back. I don't think the staff is at all surprised by this decision. So the fact that they have been not recruiting Viper anyway, Vince, knowing that this was probably going to happen, I mean, they know what the conversations were like, and you and I both know what the conversations are like. So Notre Dame is not surprised that Justin Ademilola is not coming back.
Great way to put it.
And so they've already kind of know what their Viper position is going to look like, and they're comfortable with it. I mean, you can say you don't agree or whatever, that's fine, but they like the Viper position. They really like the Viper position, meaning they look at it and they see Jordan Patelho, and he was able to so far this year stayed out of trouble, but when he plays, he's really good. You look at other positions like or other players like Josh Burnham, they love his upside, and you say, well, he didn't play a whole lot. Well, there's been plenty of great players in Notre Dame that didn't play a whole lot as freshmen.
Right.
Audio Gandiji didn't play much
down the way, so that's why he didn't play in the bowl game.
Correct.
Are they going to keep Junior Tuihalamaka there? We don't know.
Right.
But I mean, Junior got some pressure on Spencer Rattler on Friday. I mean, he for the never playing that position before and playing it for the.
He had played it during the season, but yes, correct.
You know what I'm saying?
This year, he had never played it right
in a college game.
Right.
I thought he played pretty well. Now, does he stick there? Do they put him back at linebacker? I don't know. But I mean, there are answers there that Notre Dame is confident that those are the answers for that position. So we'll see.
Yeah. So moral of the story is then you've got, you could potentially use Jaden Sneed in that position as well in sort of your 3-down alignment. You can make him the third linebacker that can kind of move all over and trigger as a passer. So not a true Viper in the sense that they've used it this year where you're having him set the edge a ton. Meaning, but like there's some nickel stuff that you could do, Vince, where you can move Jalen Sneed to that spot and have him rush the quarterback.
Sure.
You could move Drake Bowen there, Preston Zinter there, Aiden Goldbyra there, and the 4-down looks could be a guy that could play there. So there's plenty of options, and there's guys that they like. So that's the thing is what y'all have to understand is just because we didn't see a guy as a freshman doesn't mean this staff doesn't like that kid or think that kid's going to be very good.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, look, with Josh Burnham, you got to think about it. Like, okay, this is a kid moving to a brand new position he's never played before. He's filling out. He's making the academic transition. And then he had late in the year a bit of a minor injury, but one that kept him out a little bit of some bowl prep. So, hey, let's let this kid redshirt, and then maybe you might get him for 4 more years. If not, you get him for 2 or 3, and if he breaks out and you feel good about it. So they made the decision to redshirt him. And I'm okay with that. I am. But just because they redshirted him doesn't mean – and they knew that Josh was the kind of kid that would be acceptable to a redshirt.
Right.
And that's amenable, I guess, is the word that I probably should use there, Vince. But other guys, not so much. So you've got to be aware of that. But like Donovan Hinish didn't play this year. I've heard a lot of good things from the staff about Donovan Hinish. They really like that kid, right? Tyson Ford started to come along late in the year. Just because we don't see guys doesn't mean that they are not high on him. And we've seen that. Like Audric Estime didn't play much last year on running back. Doesn't mean the staff didn't love him. And he had 7 carries and they came in 2 blowouts.
Mm-hmm.
And then what does he do? The next year he goes out and breaks out. Right. So there's a lot of those young kids they like. They love their freshman class, the one that's on campus. And next year you're going to see that class making even more and more of an impact. And that's going to be really important, Vince. So I think there may be some guys that can play Viper as part of multiple positions that a guy can play. But right now they're kind of more focusing on that big end spot, the defensive end. Because how Notre Dame calls it is defensive end and Viper is what they call those 2 positions. So that's what the position they've kind of focused on. And then someone who can maybe play a little bit inside. And we have some other questions about what we think the defense might look like. And so I'll save the rest of the comments for once we get to that question. We do have a couple of super chats down there, Vince, if you want to.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna go down and star those here real quick and get to some of those here real fast.
All right. Well, here's one right here from Milton Fan. What are the most significant changes or working to change has Marcus Freeman made? Have locker room issues been fixed?
I think so. Yeah, you're just going to leave out that hashtag caveman voice equals best voice. Just go ahead and leave that out, huh, Vince?
I guess I did, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Milton loves it, man. He loves it.
Yeah. So for me, Vince, the locker room issues, from what I'm told, they've taken a lot of steps to fixing that.
Good.
And they started taking steps during the season. You know, there's some guys that on the team that just weren't necessarily bought. And I think a lot of it was from veterans. And this is actually somewhat understandable. It's harder to get guys that were under a previous coach for a long time to kind of buy in to what you're doing, especially when things don't go your way early on. And that's why we saw some guys transfer out. Yeah. And, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. So a lot of those guys are gone now, whether their careers are over or whatever the case may be. A lot of those guys are gone now. And some of that was dealt with during the season.
Yeah.
So that's really the big one. You got to get the buy-in, Vince. You know this. No matter what, right or wrong, with whatever decision you make, you've got to have buy-in. Mm-hmm. If you don't have buy-in, you're going to have a hard time being the team that you're capable of.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. All right, Joe, mixing a little politics in here. Thanks for the super chat, though, Joe. Afternoon, fellas. Great show. Hartman. Okay, got that out of the way. The Speaker of the House thing is a debacle. All right, that's out of the way. Question.
Agree to disagree.
10-2 is a reasonable floor for us next year.
Floor, yes. Yes, that's the floor. Meaning the worst this team should do next year is 10-2. Yes, that's very reasonable. Very reasonable
for this year, too.
Yeah, which is why we said this year was a disappointment.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Because the floor is basically what's the acceptable win-loss record that makes you say you're moving forward.
Right.
And I think when you look at next year's schedule, I mean, like 2021, the floor was 12-0 for me when you looked at how bad that schedule turned out to be, and they fell short. If that team goes 10-2, it's a disaster. If this year's team would have gone 10-2, you'd have been like, that's a pretty good year. When you consider, maybe
everything that
better.
Happened. Yeah, right.
Right. But man, you had some big wins, because here's the deal. If you just don't lose to Marshall and Stanford, we're looking at the season saying, you gave USC everything you can handle and you gave Ohio State everything. It just wasn't good enough. You got to get better. But you also smacked Clemson and you smacked North Carolina and, you did all these things and you feel good about your team. And, yeah, I wish it would have been better, but I'm content. I'm happy with the direction they're going.
Right.
9-4 is not acceptable. And then you go out in a bowl game and hopefully win a bowl game. 9-4 wasn't acceptable to me. And next year, anything worse than 10-2 is going to be unacceptable to me.
I agree with that.
Just because of just a lot of the stuff that you need to have worked out should be worked out. So, yeah. I'm just going to say this real quick, okay? Number one is just because you get a super chat, Joe, I'm more than willing to engage with you, but people standing up for their principles is never a bad thing for me. I'll just leave it at that, okay? And I can't stand our Congress on either side. Vince, you know my stance on this. I dislike the R's as much as I dislike the D's, and you know this. You know what I mean? So if we're going to do things, I say get them all out is my stance. So, yeah, if you're going to do something that's going to take out the leadership from a voting standpoint of Congress, I wish both parties would do that. Get rid of all the clowns we've had in leadership for however many years, all these fossils that have continued to steal money from us for decades. Get rid of all of them, R's and D's, all of them. Bring in some fresh leadership. And the other thing too is we've been conditioned to think that Congress should always be doing stuff. That's not how it was started. It was meant to be a difficult thing to get bills passed. It was always meant to be a difficult thing. And if you want to talk about contempt, go read the first 100 years of how there was a dude that got beat down on the floor of the House or the Senate in the 1800s. Like, literally got beat down, right? So what we see here is child's play the way it was the first 100 years. So I think it should be hard for Congress to do things because right now they just keep stealing from us. And, they spent over $100,000 to study Thanos's thing. You know that, right?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
What is there to study? It's fake.
Yeah,
it's not real.
Exactly. So
I could save you a lot of money and just give you $4.99. You can rent.
So anyway, only because you brought that up in a super chat, I respond to it. So I don't think it's a debacle. I like it when people stand up their principles. Now let's freaking get away from politics and back to football.
Fair enough. Matt from Shanghai, thanks for the super chat. How do you anticipate the staff will approach defensive line next year, given lack of ideal size and unproven talent? Move to a more 3-3-5, transfers, all of the above.
I think we are going to see more 3 down. This is just 100% my opinion. I have not been told this. Like, somebody say, hey, Brian, we may do this. So pretend like you know what you're talking about. I'm not doing that. I'm just giving you my opinion. I think when I look up at the makeup of the roster, I see a team that just looks more like it should be more of a 3-3 hybrid team, meaning your Vipers are guys like Patelho and Burnham and Junior that can move all over. And I think Jordan Patelho did a really good job playing on the edge in the bowl game, but I also think there are better ways to use him and Burnham where it's not only doing that, right? Like, did a really good job there, but move him around, drop him in coverage. And now they didn't do that in the bowl game, I think, because Vince, that's just not who they've been all year.
Yeah.
And I'm good with that. Don't try to invent something you haven't done all year. Stick with who you are. But I think next year when you have a whole off season and you have multiple guys that can do that, because let's say you'd have practiced all bowl season to have Jordan doing all these different things and he gets hurt, who else is going to do that? Because you don't want to play Burnham. He's been out with a little minor surgery and that kind of stuff. Maybe he could have played, but do you really want to thrust him into that role in a bowl game like that? I don't think so. So when I look at it, Vince, I kind of like that fitting their personnel really well. Mm-hmm. Is kind of having a 3-3-5 where you have the Patelho, Burnham, Junior kind of linebacker / end where you can quickly move from a 3 to 4 down, and then having 2 linebackers starting. So like a Mike and a Will, and then a true 5-man secondary with hopefully a third safety playing that spot, which now would be the position would go to, potentially Thomas Harper, and you'd be able to get to that 3 down type of thing. Right. So yeah, that's where you go. So, hey guys, I answered the question about the politics stuff. We're moving on. Okay. Also move on in the chat. All right. So I only answered the question because the guy gave us a super chat, right? Gave my opinion. It's all good. We can now move on from it. Okay. So let's do that. Okay.
I'm so glad I'm not reading the chat right now. All right.
Yes.
I don't want to get sucked in because I know I would. Yes. All right. We got a super chat from Sean Kelly. Thank you very much, Sean. What happened with Justin, Ademilola, Brian, and Braun and Vunce?
Braun and Vunce? That's fine. I think he's doing that because he put Vunce in. Did he ever explain to you why he was mad at you?
Was it? I don't think it wasn't him. It was somebody else. They actually had an avatar. It was a different Sean. I think.
Gotcha. So, different Sean anyway. Kelly. Okay.
I don't know if it was a Kelly.
I thought it was Sean Kelly, so it might be a different one. Yeah.
Maybe.
So, Sean, I think it's just time to move on. I mean, that's about all I'm gonna say about it right at the moment. I may have more to say about it after the draft, but for now, we'll just kind of. I think both sides were ready to. I think Justin was ready to go, honestly, and Vince and I will talk more about this after the show. I think at the end of the day, it was just. The brothers came in together. They're going to go out together.
I respect that. I mean, I respect that part of it. I do. Yeah. I mean, they're twins. They have literally done everything together.
Yeah. Here's my thing. And this is something I had said to somebody about Justin is what else does Justin have to prove? The only reason to come back is if he's going to be put in a position where he can be the guy.
Yeah.
He can be Foskey. And that's not what Notre Dame was going to have him do. That's not what anybody else was going to have him do if he wanted to transfer, right? It's just it's look, if they're just going to use you like they've been using you, that's great. If you just want to be part of the team and help the team win, that's totally fine. No problem with that. But at this point in time, Vince, it's just one of those things where there may be more risk to it than reward by coming back for another year. What if he gets hurt? And he's no spring chicken. He'd be a 6th-year player. So he'd be what, close to 24?
Yeah.
In a league where 30 is considered ancient. You know what I mean? Like, it's not as bad as the NBA, but it's pretty bad, especially for a guy that's not an every down guy. Put you 1 year further away from your second contract. So unless you just loved being a college football player, which is fine, I just don't know what the value was for Justin to come back. Now, of course, Notre Dame, good player and all that kind of stuff, and maybe could have helped and all that stuff for sure. But I just don't think for Justin it made a lot of sense. And I think for Notre Dame it'll end up being a good thing, because sometimes you need to have guys leave so you can start preparing your next generation of players. So I'm comfortable with what happened here, and we'll talk about it more after the draft.
Good call
for sure.
Matt 2011 GT. All right, thank you for the super chat, Matt. Appreciate it. Does Jim Harbaugh leave Michigan high and dry if these allegations turn out to be true? In other words, is it more likely he leaves for the NFL?
I honestly don't know, Vince. I don't know enough about the particulars of how Michigan feels about it.
Yeah, it's such a weird situation because he just came out with a statement. He talked to the AD and the president, and he can't tell the future, but he'll probably be enthusiastically coaching Michigan next year, whatever BS comment he made. And then like an hour later, these allegations hit the media. Now, he knows that they were out there.
Correct. They're informed before the release. Correct. Like, they don't just drop a release where the school's like, what?
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying.
Hold on a second.
Right.
Wait a minute. What? We're getting they serve the notice of allegation, then announce it. So Michigan knew this was coming.
Right.
So I highly doubt that they have him put that statement out. If
let's see what kind of heat he gets.
If what I'm hearing is accurate, I hope Michigan sues the crap out of the NCAA. But I don't want to get too much into it because I want to make sure that I hear all the facts. But basically, it was like involved in some 2020 recruiting stuff with COVID, and the allegation was minor, but they didn't like how Michigan responded to it.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously,
they thought that Jim Harbaugh was being deceitful.
The NCAA should not call anyone on the carpet for being deceitful. You let North Carolina get away with having fake freaking classes. Don't talk to me about how you didn't like Jim Harbaugh's response to COVID visit stuff. You know what I mean? Like, give me a break. You did nothing to a school that had they faked classes for athletes. Yes. You did nothing. Shut up. Just shut up. Run the NCAA tournament and shut up. That's all I want to hear from you. You do nothing. You don't know. You're going to let these schools blatantly cheat and pay players, right? Outside what you say are they're supposed to be the rules, and this is what you're going to come down on,
right?
Give me a break. Give me a break. And I guarantee you, it's no different than what every other school did. Guarantee it. So screw the NCAA. I can't. That's how much I hate the NCAA right now. Is go Michigan when it comes to the battle of the NCAA. I don't care. I dislike them. I dislike them that much. That much.
Oh, God.
Just can't do it. Screw it.
Right.
I'm tired of them.
Oh.
I'm ready for it to die. I'm ready for the NCAA to no longer be a thing. I'm ready for it. Because right now, what does it do except collect money? Nothing.
I don't disagree with anything you said about the NCAA.
Well, I know. It hurts for you to hear those words and say those words. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
All right. I just need to move on from my own sanity. All right. Joe with another super chat. Joe, thank you very much. He says, in a way too early preseason poll, which I hate, by the way, who's your top 5? We are at least top 10. So glad I'm starting baseball workouts this week. I've been cranky the past few weeks.
Gosh, man, first of all, Joe, I can't really answer that one right now. I'm going to be honest with you because A, I haven't studied enough teams to know. Number 2, I mean, I assume Georgia's going to be in there, right? Because
Sure.
I'm a you're the champ, so somebody beats you thing. But if TCU wins it all, I'm gonna have them in the top 5. If they're not, then I won't have them in the top 5 for next year. I think they just got a hot run. But I'm also a believer that if you're the champs, you're number 1 until somebody beats you. That's just how I believe about it, right? Like, no point in time this year should Georgia ever have been ranked anything other than number 1 because they were the champs last year, and nobody still has beaten them.
And they didn't
right.
lose. Like,
right.
Yeah.
So, they're the champs until somebody beats them. Beyond that, I mean, I'd have to go break teams down. I mean, I got to see what Alabama's going to be in the conversation. Ohio State's going to be in the conversation. USC is going to be in the conversation. But I got to study just all of what these teams got back. And the other part too is let's let the transfer portal close for the winter. That's the other part. Before, like, if you'd asked me 2 days ago, my view on Notre Dame would be a little different. Well, no, it wouldn't have, because I knew the Sam Harper was coming.
I was going to say, you knew. Yeah.
But let's say, gosh, what is it? What do I got to go back, Vince? What, 3 weeks?
Yeah.
About a little over 3 weeks.
Yeah, but basically the end
month
of the regular season, let's call it.
Okay, sure.
I mean,
when we didn't know who the quarterback transfer is going to be, okay, I don't know where I'd put Notre Dame. I'd be optimistic, but I'm like, I didn't see Tyler Buckner in the bowl game. I didn't know what to expect from him. I didn't know certain players are not coming back. I didn't know that they were going to get Sam Hartman. I didn't know that they were going to get, Thomas Harper. I didn't know that, there's a lot of things. I thought they were going to have Peyton Bowen.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of different things that you look at. So let me just see this cycle, Joe, and maybe bring this question back up maybe in a couple weeks when the portal closes. And don't do a super chat because you've already paid for it once, but just during a mailbag, bring it up and I'll answer it. But I got to study the rosters a little bit more too, Vince.
I also think that it could change, not drastically, but definitely change after spring ball and after that transfer portal session goes through. You know what I mean?
But I'm okay kind of doing like an early look based on, of what we know right now, here's where we're at.
That's fair.
But I just want to make sure it's an educated ranking because I got to look and see who else coming back. There's guys that technically I don't think Bryce Young is declared for the NFL draft yet, right? Technically.
That's true.
So I expect him to, but he hasn't yet. So until he does, how do you
Will
not
Anderson
have
declare?
Bam? I don't think so either. Yeah. Right. So now they're going to.
Sure.
But the point is they haven't yet. And so there's just too much to know between now and then, Joe. So this would be a great question in a couple weeks when I know more. The portal's closed. More guys have declared for the draft, and I'll have more time to kind of study who is and is not coming back. But that's probably a fun. You know what? I want to do some more shows like that this year, Vince, where we actually do some shows where we kind of do our own preseason top 25 or way too early top 25. I think those will be fun shows. You all let us know in the comments section. Would that be something you guys would like to do kind of during the off season, to sort of some shows about, hey, our Irish Breakdown preseason top 25 and Heisman contenders and sleeper teams. So obviously we'll talk about where Notre Dame fits in that, but just where we also talk about college football. I'd be curious if that's something you all would be interested in on Irish Breakdown. Or we could just do it on CFB Nation, but that's something I'd be curious about.
I would say, just from when you do a top 10 or a top 25 or whatever, you are so detailed and you look at these teams and you do it's amazing. I don't know if I could even do that. I look at a team and I'm like, okay, does this feel like a top 5 team? Does this feel like a top 10 team, top 25 team, etc., regardless of, what's around them and what's logical, but does this feel like a top 10? Like right now, Notre Dame feels like a top 10 team.
No question.
I'm not ready to say they're top 5 yet because I still think there's some things that need to shake out.
They got to prove that a little bit more.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
They're top 10 for me right now.
They feel like a top 10 team for me.
That I could say confidently. I agree with you.
All right.
I agree with you. Yeah. Will they be 6 or 10?
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Agreed. 100%. Because that's where you have to dig in a little bit more to see what else is around and what other, but they feel like a top 10 team right now to me.
Agree.
So
agree.
All right. Brandon says, how could Golden and company adjust the defense best formation wise if the depth at Viper isn't sufficient, but other positions are? I mean, you kind of talked about that already, but if you want to touch on this one, you can.
Oh boy. I guess I just I guess I don't accept the premise because I think that they're going to be really good at Viper. I'm just not worried about Viper. I've got other concerns. I'm not worried about Viper.
Right.
Having said that, let's just address the question. Let's say that they wanted to get a guy in the portal and they don't like what there's coming back and they missed on Keon and they couldn't get other guys and they're just, man, we just have struck out at Viper nonstop and we're screwed. And gee, we thought Justin Ademilola was going to come back. He's not coming back. Like, man, we're screwed. They can go to more of a true 3-3-5. And I do think the personnel would fit that. Okay. And you could have, Collie and Maris battle for the will job, Jalen Snead battle for the will job. You can have JD Bertrand at Mike. You can figure out what you're going to do at the Sam position. Maybe it's a Burnham and a Botelho situation if you don't think those guys can be Vipers or whatever the case may be. So you can go to more of a true 3-3-5 like TCU uses. I would do it a little bit differently because I don't think you have kind of the nose guard to kind of to really run that in a traditional two-gapping sense. But I would say go to a 3-3-5 and just be a heavy pressure team is what I would say to do. Use your speed to your advantage, and because as I'm not a big 3-3-5 fan for me personally, but one of the things I like about it is one of the challenges it presented, because we faced some 3-3-5 teams during my coaching career, not a lot, and they didn't look like they do now. Yeah, they were a different type of 3-3-5. Sometimes it was like a 3-5, Vince, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm sure you faced this too, where it was like a 3-3, but then like two overhangs. It was cover 1, cover 3 team. But from a box standpoint, what that alignment does is it gives them a lot of stunting and twisting options that happen quick. So like when you're doing a twist with 2 defensive linemen, there's a looper that has to be involved, right? I mean, it's a little bit more of an extra second or so to happen. When you're crashing, when you're doing those same stunts with linebackers, Vince, they hit quick.
Yeah.
And if a team is good at it,
right, and that's the key.
That can give you some problems.
Because in high school, when I would see a 3-3-5 or a 3-3 stack or whatever you want to call it, I salivated because I like to run the ball. I salivated with a 3-man front because I always had athletic linemen and we could get to the second level and we'd be good to go. Like salivated. But if you have athletic linebackers and they are very good at twisting and stunting and moving and doing some different things, it can mess you up big time on the offensive line because you have to have your head on a swivel. You have to know your rules and you have to execute them. You can't just get the guy in your head and call it a day, because guys are going to slip through and it's going to be ugly. But generally at the high school level, it was not run as smoothly as it is at some of the collegiate level, obviously. So I used to love a 3-3-5 as an offensive coordinator. I know there's some of that that's still out there, at the college level even. But if you get a team that runs it really, really well, that's a different conversation. So I do agree with you on that.
Right.
There's a fun one here.
But that's true with anything, Vince. I've seen teams run 4-3s and 4-2-5s where it sucks. It's just like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm a big proponent to running what your personnel is going to allow you to do. But you can't just willy-nilly change your formations every year either. So, I mean, there's a fine line in there where you have to be good at what you're doing, but also tailor it towards what you are good at.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Real quick, Vince, Bryce Young, I just looked it up. Bryce Young did actually declare. He just doesn't do social media. So,
gotcha.
Yeah, he did, in fact, declare. So, yeah, he did say he's going to be out.
Well, clearly, Alabama's out of the top 25.
Yeah, and so did Will Anderson Jr. and Jahmyr Gibbs. So they did, in fact, do that.
Okay.
They did,
well, there
in fact,
you go.
do that. I just
shows
missed
how
the
much I
announcement.
pay attention to Alabama. So, it is what it is.
I just missed that announcement. So, yeah, they did. They did.
Okay.
Yeah, they did.
Awesome. All right. Irish Blooded, I think, has a good question here. A fun one. Just based on projections, no further flips or moves. What would be your 2 deep on the wide receiving core going into next year?
Oh, so, right now for me, based on how everything kind of played out this year, my receiving core would be, I'd have Tobias Merriweather at X. I'd have Jaden Thomas at Z, which is the slot. I'd have Tobias Merriweather W. I'd have Caleb Smith.
Just put Tobias at both positions.
I'm sorry, Deion Colsey.
Okay,
Deion Colsey at W.
I was like,
That's
I know
how
he's
good
good.
Tobias is, man. That's how good he is. No. Deion Colsey at W, which is close to what it was in the bowl game. They had Lorenzo Styles starting at X. I don't think Lorenzo Styles has done anything to lock down a starting position to me.
Agreed.
And so I'm giving Tobias every chance to beat him out. Lorenzo's going to play for me, though. He's going to be an X and a Z. I'm going to have Caleb Smith play all over. I mean, he does a lot of stuff that Jaden Thomas does, but he brings a little bit more W potential to the table to me, a little bit more down the field ability than Jaden has. He's going to play a bunch for me. And then of the freshmen, so that's my 5-man rotation. And then which freshman or two is able to crack into that lineup as well is kind of how I would do it. So like Tobias can play W and X. Braden can, or not Braden, but Lorenzo Salas can play X and Z. Deion Colsey can play, is more of a W. Caleb Smith can play all 3, and Jaden Thomas can play all 3. I just like Caleb as a W more than I like Jaden as a W. I want to keep Jaden more in the slot to the field in my base look as well. So that would be kind of how I would go.
I love it. All right.
Yep.
Christopher LaFaro. Does anyone think Marcus Freeman moves on from Al Washington or James Laurinaitis?
Well, number one, I don't see the need to move on from James Laurinaitis. He's not the primary
analyst
linebacker coach,
right?
And he's in his first year as a coach. I don't see any reason to be conversing about getting rid of him. So I just don't see that one being a thing. So no, I don't expect that to happen. Al Washington, I mean, I would, but I'm not the one that's got to make that decision. So
right,
but I'm also okay with the notion of, look, this is a guy that I hired for a reason.
Sure.
No, I didn't like the job he did. And I'm confident that Marcus Freeman's not happy with the play of the front 7 this year. I'm very confident in saying that. But as I've said in the past, Vince, firing a guy is not the only reason to get better play. Clearly he believes that Al Washington can do a certain job. He hasn't been doing it so far. Well, there's 2 options. One is to fire him. 2 is to sit him down and say, hey, look, man, I need you to do better. Right? You're my guy. I'm going to always have your back. I'm going to call that Driscoll guy and tell him he needs to back off you and not rip you all the time. But I need you to give me a reason to defend you moving forward.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And then tell him what that means. What does that look like? I need the defensive line to play better. Here's what that looks like. I need you to recruit better. Here's the expectations. So I would imagine he would probably do that first before just going out and getting a guy and replacing him. So that would be my guess is what he would do, Vince. Yeah. I don't know one way or the other, but my guess would be that he's not going to move on from anybody like that, especially Washington. It's going to be more of okay, here's what you did well this year. Here's what I need you to do better at.
Yeah.
And,
I agree. Yeah. If we're having the same discussion 12 months from now, I think it's a different answer. But I think right now, after 1 year, I think it's a discussion. You know what I mean? I do. I think it's a discussion between the head coach and Coach Washington. And I also agree with you about James Laurinaitis. He's an analyst. He's not a fall guy for whatever you think was wrong with the linebackers. There's a lot other issues above him. And he's a first-year head coach. As a first-year coach, period. You've seen first-year coaches. There's you're drinking through the fire hose as a first-year coach. And he's not even an actual coach. He's an analyst. So let's let that breathe a little bit, and you can't blame an analyst for the issues with a position group. That's a stretch, in my opinion. All right, Jay Henry with a super chat. Thank you very much, Jay. Will there be a Thomas Harper breakdown here or on the board? And will his addition affect Ramon?
So Jay jumped in a little late.
Yep.
So I think Jay missed the earlier breakdown. So Jay, we did break him down earlier. We'll dive more into the transfers again next week when Ryan gets back. We'll do even more film evaluation. I'm going to try. We're still working on getting film that we can actually use. I'm going to try to do some videos that are for message board only, because I just can't put them on YouTube because I'd get demonetized and get strikes against my account. This is the way that they do it. So if I try to monetize it. So we'll try to do something like that here over the next couple weeks. I'm going to do something on Sam Hartman, do something on Thomas Harper as well. And then the other transfers that they get that aren't kickers. I'm not doing a breakdown on kickers. I'm sorry. I'm not happening. If you want to do one, go for it. Your kid's a kicker. I'm going to deal with the real football positions. Okay?
Whoa!
Yeah, I went there. We don't need to see that. We don't need to see all that. Glad you're wearing pants. So regarding the second part of Jay's question, how does it affect Ramon? I don't think it affects Ramon a ton. if Ramon plays well. If Ramon grows up as a player this offseason, I'll make sure I'm clear on that. I'm not talking about as a person, I'm talking about as a player. If he grows up as a player, becomes a little bit more consistent, a little bit more impactful, he's going to play a bunch.
Yeah.
I think Thomas is, from my understanding, and again, it could be wrong, his primary number one, this is where you're going to battle, is in the slot where Tariq Bracy played. But then also provides you depth at safety when you're in your base defensive looks. So I don't think he affects Ramon a ton in that regard, Jay. Now, if somebody else steps up at nickel and Ramon's struggling at safety, and this kid's clearly one of your best two safeties, then yes, it could affect Ramon. But I honestly think that like Ramon and Xavier, they're going to go into this offseason with given every opportunity to seize hold of a job.
Yeah.
It's up to them to take hold of it. And I don't think the staff is necessarily looking at portal guys that are going to come in and beat them out, or they want to beat them out. At least that guy's not on the table right now. And so the only thing that's going to, I think, affect Ramon really is Ramon. That's really what it comes to. Same with Xavier. The only thing that's going to keep those guys from having very important roles next year is them, in my opinion. So we'll see how it plays out.
We got a super chat here from Matt. It says, Brian, in your opinion, what additional needs does Notre Dame have in the portal? Vince, don't go kick rocks. Did you give that guy a detention?
Well, no, we didn't. No, because we wanted him to explain why he was saying, like, is he joking? Is it?
Well, I think he thinks like in real life, like, did I give him a detention? Like, he's just on here to be that guy.
I gotcha. Yeah, I gotcha. So he's like a student.
Yeah, so
he'd have to be a student now, right? This is only you've never been in a position to do that before,
right?
He'd have
to be a student right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird.
But thanks. I won't go kick rocks, Matt. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Very weird. So, yeah, but additional needs in the portal, Vince. I still think another defensive lineman is needed. I think a big guy can play either big end or three technique. I mean, I'd love to get a nose guard that's 320. I mean, I'm never saying I don't want that. It's just that guy's not out there. And if he is, he's rare and he's going to attract a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. So I just – I think that's a position. I think they're okay at receiver. I really do. Unless that they have a departure from the current roster. But if the current roster stays intact, I'm fine with where they are at receiver. The only way that I would really go after another receiver is he's an impact guy. Like if J. Michael Sturdivant wanted to come from Cal, I'd take him in a heartbeat. I don't think he's looking at Notre Dame. I'm sure Notre Dame will, I know that Notre Dame has kind of reached out and tried to engage with him since he joined. I don't know if there's been any conversation, but from everything I've heard, he's looking at the West Coast.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I expect from him. But, I mean, I'd take him in a heartbeat because he is 6'2", 6'3", and fast. He's an impact guy. So I'd take him. But other than that, I'm good with where they are at receiver. I just develop them. That's my thing. Just coach them up.
Right.
So those are the two positions for me. And honestly, I'd be open to a guard if it was an impact guy. Like just to say hypothetically, like Zach Zinter decided he wanted to play his last season in college with his brother. All right, cool. Yeah, I'd take him in a heartbeat. Like, could you imagine the Notre Dame offensive line? With all due respect to the last two Michigan lines, which have been very good, I thought one of them deserved the Joe Moore Award, the other did not. But they've been very good. Could you imagine Zach Zinter on an offensive line with Joe Alt and Blake Fisher and Zeke Carell and Billy Schrouth and boy, that'd be fun to watch. With Harry Heastan coaching it,
yeah,
so that'd be fun to watch. There. That'd be really fun to watch. Yeah, be really fun to watch.
All right, Scott L. What can Notre Dame do to make its QBs as prepared for every game as they appear to be with extra time before game one, after a bye week, or before a bowl game? Hire more staff. Simplify things.
I think it's about simplifying a little bit, Vince.
Yeah.
I think both sides of the ball take too much into games. And I think the one thing that I would, if Tom Reese asked my opinion, and he hasn't and won't, but if he did, the thing that I would say to him is you've got to find a sweet spot for the volume that you use each week in preparation. Because what happens in bowl games or with the bye week is they take the same amount of volume they normally do, but they've got the extra preparation time to digest it. And so they execute it more. And there's always stuff they don't use. And honestly, Vince, if you, unless you're an air raid team, because there's just not a lot to their offense,
right?
You're always going to go in the game with stuff you don't use.
Always.
It just it's part. It happens in high school. I guarantee you.
Always. And then I kick myself after the fact
Right.
sometimes,
Or
but sometimes it
like,
doesn't
look,
come up.
the moment just like
Yes.
I was, I had I had a conversation recently with someone that said that there was something that they practiced during the week that they had in their back pocket if they needed it, but the situation never called for it.
Right. All
Fine.
the time.
And you may say, hey, we're going to run this, but then our counter off of that, if the team stops it, is going to be this. But then you're like, but they never stopped it. They never got out of what they were doing that allowed us. Like, so we had this run play called, and we had a couple things built off that run play. We're going to do a reverse and a play action off of that run play. So when they did this to stop the run play, because we really felt good about having success with it, this is a true story of my coaching career, is if in order for them to stop what we're going to do to them with this zone run, they're going to have to do this and get out of what they do and do this. We just felt we had the matchup advantage, the numbers. We knew we could manipulate them in a way that was going to work. And when their answers are going to be this or this, and if they do this, we got to reverse off of it. If they do this, then we got to play action off of it. That's the only two answers that they really have from what they've shown. But they never changed. So we just kept running at them. You know what I mean? So we never needed those two plays. And so we didn't use them. That's okay. But I think sometimes there's a happy medium where you've got too much you're not using. And you just got to zero in just on a little bit smaller package. To me, Vince, is something that I would like to see them do on both sides of the ball that I think could help them. And on both sides, I do. Yep. And I think the other thing too is having more positional versatility from a personnel versatility helps too, Vince, because when you're always going to be in 12 personnel, because that's what your roster dictates, it means you have to get even more creative with more stuff in order to be effective, because otherwise there's only so much you can do. But what made them so effective in the bowl game is, even though they had a decent amount of stuff in there, I don't think they ran a bunch of stuff in the pass game. Their versatility was in the run game, which I liked. But they just did it out of so many different looks.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's the sweet spot for
formations, me. The motions,
I felt like they found that happy medium. And then Tommy Rees is one thing he's always been really good at, and I don't think fans realize this because they haven't had a quarterback that can make those throws. Vince, you know this. You've been at these games. He's really good. He can design about 3 or 4 plays a game where he's just going to get somebody wide open. It just is. And unfortunately, the quarterbacks just don't hit it. You know what I mean? They either don't see it or miss it.
Yeah, right.
And in the bowl game, they didn't miss those. It was the Jaden Thomas corner, that corner route off Jaden Thomas, the one that was went for 25 yards. It was a play to Lindsey. That was one where they did the motion in a way that they knew was going to get them to roll down, which meant you roll down Braden Lindsey, you're not covering Braden Lindsey. He knew that. So there just were a few plays like that, Vince, where they knew we're going to get them in this look and we know we can beat them with it, you know? And, he's always been good at that, but it's some of the other stuff that doesn't hit that they've got to get better at, some of that stuff. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Some of it's quarterback play. Some of it you're putting a little bit too much on your receivers because they don't always run fast, because they often play with a little bit of, I'm not sure what I'm doing here to them. So that would be my thing, is find that sweet spot of having enough volume to be the complex team you want to be, but not so much volume that you're just not good at anything. Mm-hmm. And that would be my advice. If they can find that sweet spot, I like what they're going to be.
Dangerous. Dangerous.
Yeah.
Jacob, what's your confidence level? So we'll go scale of 1 to 10 that Notre Dame brings in an impact defensive lineman.
Impact right now, 3, maybe 2. I don't think they're going to get Anthony Lucas right now. I don't, unfortunately. And most of the other guys on the board are not impact guys. Like there's a defensive lineman that I've been asked not to say his name. He's got a lot of potential and upside, but he's not a guy that I would say is an impact guy for sure. Right? He's a guy that could be one.
Right. But he's not a walk in the door.
Yeah. So if they get him, I'm going to feel better about it because it's another good player that's got some potential. But he's a guy that's had some injury issues, and just I got to see him step up and prove that. But just getting an impact D lineman, no, I don't see that. But I don't know if that's necessarily what they need. They just need a guy that can come in and play, whether it's a defensive tackle, whether it's even if it's just another Chris Smith or a couple Chris Smith type guys. That's fine with me, because depth is more of the issue than necessarily starters for me. It's more of the depth part.
Brian Hockney, with Justin going pro, is there anyone else that is in the portal that Notre Dame is interested in, or do you think that we should look at? How do you see the D-line looking in the fall?
Speaking of, I think we're going to see the Viper rotation be Jordan Patojo, Josh Burnham, Junior Tuihalamaka, who I think could also be a guy that eventually – I think Junior Tuihalamaka could be groomed to take the role that Justin Ademilola had. Very similar body types, very similar athletes. I think Junior might be a little bit more athletic than Justin, where he can kind of play some big end Vince and some Viper and, moving around and be a nickel guy, maybe even do some of the stuff that Bo Bauer did on third down as a pass rusher. I could see, Junior having that role. I think big end, right as of right now, my anticipation is, barring transfers coming in, I think they're going to be forced to have to move Riley Mills back inside. I think they're going to have to. If they're going to be a 4-down team. And then you've got Nana, you've got Alexander Ahrensberger at big end, potentially maybe Tyson Ford battles there, potentially one of the freshmen like Boubacar or Brendan Vernon battles there. You could see a transfer coming in and playing there. Maybe Junior in some certain looks could play there. Maybe Aiden Gobira takes a jump physically and he could move over there. So there's some options there, but that depth chart needs to get solidified. And then inside, you have Howard Cross and Riley Mills. You'll have Gabriel Rubio is going to have a role there this year. Then you're going to have some young guys. They're going to have a chance to develop and have a shot. Jason Onye is this year that Jason Onye kind of breaks out and forces himself into the rotation. Is Aiden Keana going to be healthy enough to be a factor? He's a guy that if he can stay healthy and reach his potential could really help this football team because he provides some beef.
Yeah.
Like if you could have like him and Gabriel Rubio as kind of like the two noses, and then you could let Howard Cross play some 3 technique, with like Jason Onye and some other guys that are, and now you could feel better about having Riley Mills outside more at that point in time. And so that's kind of the way I look at it, Vince. But that's a big question mark. Jason Onye is a question mark right now because he hasn't been that guy. That's not a negative because I didn't expect Jason Onye to help the first 2 years. He could have played 2 years of high school football. That's it.
Yeah.
And didn't get to play his senior year because of the COVID stuff in Rhode Island. So he's a kid that the light could go on for him, and all of a sudden you feel really good about that because I've heard he'll flash. It's just he's still learning the game.
Yeah,
if the light goes on for him, that helps you a ton. Gabriel Rubio really just ascended throughout the year. Aiden Keana, those are 2 of the really key guys to me, Vince. Those 2 guys got to break out this year, right. And then of course if Tyson Ford, the young guys, you got Tyson Ford, Donovan Heinisch, Aiden Gobira, Josh Burnham, Junior Tuihalamaka, then the incoming freshman class. Like you got to get 3 or 4 of those guys to really be able to help you this year as well, of that whole group. Do that, and I think they'll be fine. I do.
From one side of the defense with the big boys to the other side, do you see Harry Hiestand looking for 5 best offensive linemen to fill vacant guard spots regardless of position, or the best guards?
Well, you got to have the best guards. Now, the best guards can be your number 2 center or your number 2 tackle. But they've got to be good at guard. Like, here's the thing. If your 5 best players are pure tackles and they can't play guard, then you can't play your 5 best players.
Right, exactly.
All right, you've got to play your 5 best players as far as what the best 5-man rotation is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the 5 most talented players. This is a good question, Josh. And so I'm not pushing back on you. I'm just explaining because it's a very good question. I've said this expression before. If your 5 best players are centers, 6'2", 300-pound centers, and they're your 5 best players,
they can't play.
You're not going to have a great offensive line because they're not going to be able to play tackle at the same level. They're not right. Among your 5 best as a tackle. And so it's like if you say your 8 best players on offense are all wide receivers, you can't say we'll just play your best players because you don't have enough spots for them to all be. None of those 8 are quarterbacks. Right. None of those 8 are left tackles. Right? I mean, you've got to play the best guys at the positions that you have on your football team. So it's about finding the best 5-man group. Right? And so that may be moving a tackle to guard. It may be moving a center to guard. It may be just your young guards emerging.
Right.
I just, it could be a situation where, Blake Fisher moves inside to guard. I don't see that happening. I don't. I'm not saying I'd be opposed to it, but I don't think Blake wants to do it from what I'm told, or if he'd be open to that or not. But sure. I don't think you need to do that right now. I don't think none of the tackles to me have been good enough to say you got to justify moving Blake inside.
Right.
Because I'm not what I don't like doing is taking one position as a strength and making it not as much of a strength to help another position. I just say keep that position great and then figure out how to make that other position better.
Agreed.
But if somebody stepped up and was just like, man, this guy's just about as good at tackle as Blake is, all right, cool, then move Blake inside if he's willing. But I don't see that happening right now at this point in time.
Right.
I think it's about get Billy Schrouth ready to go. Get Andrew Kristofic ready to go. Get your young guys, Ty Chant, give him a chance to battle the spring. He's the big guy. Give Ashton Craig a chance. Give Rocco Spindler a chance. Maybe Charles Jagasol's that dude in fall camp. You know what I mean? Where it's like, this guy's just too good not to play. I don't know who the answer is going to be, but I think focusing on getting your depth players to, give Michael Carmody, who maybe isn't a guard right now, give him a chance to play there.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. And then if you don't feel good about where you are, then you can address some other options. But I also don't think it would not shock me to find out if Notre Dame was kind of eyeing the portal just in case there was a couple guys that stood out to them in regard to potentially being impact players at guard. It's not so much that they're need a guard, but if the right guy was available, and I'm not talking to Kane Madden type. I'm not talking about that. But a guy that could be better than that.
So I while you were talking, I pulled up John's question, which who are you hearing are front runners for the O-line guard position this year? Because you kind of headed down that road naturally. So I wanted to make sure I got that in.
Yeah. Schrouth is one. Kristofic's another. I mean, right now, if they're going to go play a game tomorrow with the guys that are coming back, for me, it would probably be Billy Schrouth and Andrew Kristofic or Andrew Kristofic and Michael Carmody. My problem with Michael Carmody is he's had a really hard time keeping weight on.
Okay.
He's down to 280 on the roster. Ooh. I mean, if that's anywhere close, this is too light for me. So did he have an illness that made him lose weight? Is he just having trouble keeping weight on? I don't know the answer to that, but 280 is a little too light for me to be a guard. Yeah. But I'd give him a shot. So it'd be Kristofic, Carmody, and Schrouth would be the three that would battle it for me right now. I think Billy Schrouth, if he continues to work,
he's going to be hard to keep off the field.
Yeah, very hard to keep off the field.
Mm-hmm.
Very hard to keep off the field.
Yep. For me, stay
healthy.
For me, I agree with you. I think it would be if there's going to be a game this week, it would be Kristofic and Schrouth would probably be the two guys that I would.
That would be my bet.
But there's a long time between now and the fall. Plus, there's a whole spring in there too, which hopefully we'll get a chance to see some of these guys in action.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, that's who I would go with right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what it's going to look like come September. So,
yeah.
All right, let's stay with the big boys. Charles Parson, could you explain the role of the D-line in the Notre Dame defensive scheme? Are they eating up blocks like the Georgia D-line?
No, they eat up space, but it's not like how Georgia uses it. No. And they penetrate just not enough for me. So no, it's not like what Georgia does. Georgia is a pure two gap power defensive line. Like you constantly hear about how dominant Jalen Carter is, right? And he is. He was not very good against Ohio State, but he's really, really good. But then you look at his numbers and you're like, hold on a second. That doesn't seem right. Guy had 7 tackles for loss this year. That's it. Remember how good we always kept hearing about how good he was last year? 8.5 tackles for loss.
Right.
That's it. Remember that really great nose guard they had last year? Jordan Davis is dominant, taking over games. In 15 games, he had 5.5 tackles for loss. 2 sacks. Because the dominance isn't from them getting to the ball and making plays. The dominance is from them destroying the offensive line and letting the linebackers run free of the football.
Exactly.
Right. So, it's a completely different one.
All right, Rob Osgood. Guys, don't know if you've talked about quarterbacks yet. With Sam Hartman at quarterback, I don't think the teams will stack the box like this year. If they do, they'll get torched downfield. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I mean, we've talked about Sam Hartman. You've got an article actually on irishbreakdown.com about how good Sam Hartman is at throwing the long ball. He's been the best in college football over the last 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, based on your article. And so go read that article because I think it is eye-opening to a degree. And I agree with you, Rob. If it's going to be a pick your poison, if Sam Hartman is the Sam Hartman who we think he can be with Notre Dame, it's going to be pick your poison. Do you want to load the box to try to stop Notre Dame's run game, which is going to be really, really good? Or are you going to spread it out and allow the run game to do what it needs to do against you? Notre Dame's offense has the opportunity to be extremely diverse.
Yeah.
And it's going to be what is the defense going to give us? You want to stack the box? Fine. We'll go over your head. We'll go outside.
Yep.
We'll go all over. If you want to try to stop Sam Hartman, he'll just turn around and hand the ball off to arguably the best running back room in the country. So pick your poison. That's how I see this.
Yeah. Agree.
All right. ICURN with Irish Luck asked about Sam Howell, but after thinking about it, would you say that Minchie and Hartman have similar games?
That's a good one. That's a really good one. I think that's a much better comparison than Hartman and Pine or Hartman and Buckner or Hartman and Book. I think Kenny Minchie is Sam Hartman's a good comparison. A player that I compared Kenny Minchie to on signing day was Baker Mayfield. And that's a kind of a fair comparison for Sam Hartman too, is a pocket guy that can make plays with his arm, that can also get out of the pocket, buy time, make plays with his arm outside the pocket as well. And if he needs to, can tuck that sucker and run for 8 to 10 yards. Can pull a backside read zone on 3rd and 2 and pick up the first down. I think that's I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Baker Mayfield. I'm just saying that's a comparison from a size, ability, talent standpoint. For me, is Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma.
Right.
The Oklahoma version of – I'll never compare guys what they are in the NFL. It's what they were in college, the Baker Mayfield version of who he was as a quarterback.
Right. Our buddy Alan English, happy Friday, IB. I got a brisket and 2 racks of ribs in the smoker and IB on. What could be better?
I agree. It's
not
a
whole
great
lot.
question. It's a great question.
Yeah, not a whole lot could be better. Christopher Crosby, Brian and Vince, we talked yesterday about accuracy issues, taking Sam out of the equation. How do you go about teaching it, drills, etc.?
Well, I think Sam, every quarterback needs work. I think there's 2 things that you can 3 things you can do. Number one is repetitions is always good, right? Because part of accuracy issues is I don't know quite how this guy runs his routes and how he breaks things off. And this guy tends to round off and outcut a little bit more than this guy who's really sharp. So I've got to know that as a quarterback and know who's running that route and how I need to throw it, the timing in which I need to throw it. This guy takes a little bit longer to get out of this certain cut than this guy does. So Vince, if you have a guy running the corner out and he is just super bam, stick it and go, then as soon as he's leaning, you're getting the ball out.
Yep.
Other guys, it's like, they're just longer. They're not in and out of the break sooner. So you got to wait till they actually plant and start to take that lead step before that ball's got to come out.
Now we're talking split second difference.
Correct.
But that can be the difference.
Split second difference is here to just outside my hands and complete.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Absolutely.
Right. And that takes time.
Yep.
To develop that. Other things are feet. Like when Tyler Buckner's off target, 9 out of 10 times it's his foot. It's his footwork. He's doesn't set his feet, which then because your feet are the driver of everything. Like there are some like Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers are 2 examples. Pat Mahomes are examples. Their arms are so strong that they don't need their feet to take them all the time where they need to go. Even them, sometimes the feet get them in trouble.
Sure.
But more often than not, quarterbacks, I've said this, this is how I taught it. Your feet need to be the first thing to go. Your feet need to move to where they need to go to, and then your rest of your body follows. Because a lot of times the quarterbacks is their eyes lead them. And if your eyes are leading you, as soon as you see what's open, then you've got to move your body. That's a tell, and B, you're most likely going to rush it and be off target. Right. Your feet need to lead you through your progression, and then the rest of your body follows. Because then when you see it, and I got to quickly set up and throw, your feet are already set. And, just a point is, you want to have your back heel kind of planted, so like if that's my target, I got to have my heel planted perpendicular to the target or horizontal to the target is kind of how you want to go. And then you got to make sure that your lead step, if you're able to teach it, is kind of the inside pit of where you're trying to throw the football. So if you're throwing a curl route, your back foot is kind of parallel to his chest and your lead foot is sort of opened up on his inside armpit. That's a general rule. Now, some guys can get away with that because their arms are so strong, but that's a general rule. So just getting used to that. And if it's a player, but if it's a spot, you kind of want to have your feet set for that. What you don't want to do, Vince, and if you're off by this much with your feet, you're still going to be fine. But if your lead foot opens up too much, then it takes your hips with you, which means as you're stepping and throwing, your hips are already open, but your arm's still back here. and then your arms late get through the zone, and your ball tends to be either low or high. If your foot is too narrow, then it closes your hip. So as you're kind of coming here, your hips are now fighting your feet, which tends to bring your arm down, which is why guys tend to either lead or drive the ball down. And so it's about getting your feet and your hips and your arm all kind of working together. And the only way you can ensure that happens more often than not is if your feet are taught to you as what leads you through the progressions. Is that kind of fair, Vince? I mean, does that kind of explain it?
Yep.
And then once your feet get right, then it's a lot easier to get a more consistent, because you know what more often than not messes up a quarterback's release point? It's the feet. Because of the feet then affects the hips, and the hips affect the arm angle. Because if I'm trying to throw here, but something happens here or something happens here, see how that just naturally kind of changes that? I'm not purposely changing my arm. I'm just moving my hips and leaving my arm steady, right? So if your feet are affecting your hips affect your arm. Your arm is what leads to an inconsistent release point. And the release point is the primary reason why accuracy is off, but it's the feet that dictate the release point in a lot of instances. So, yeah.
Love it.
Good question.
Good stuff.
Good question.
Good stuff. All right, Stonador. How close is Tyler Buchner to reaching his potential? What exactly would reaching his potential look like?
Oh, my gosh. What would Tyler Buchner reaching his potential look like? A not as productive Kyler Murray. Because Kyler Murray just played in a system that was incredibly, like, the numbers were insane.
From a number standpoint.
But impact-wise, similar to Kyler Murray. I really believe that. Now, Kyler Murray's faster, but I believe Tyler Buchner can be a 3,500-yard passing, 800-yard rushing player. I do. And I think he can be that guy.
How close is he? Here's the thing about Tyler Buchner that gets me excited, and I think this is what gets Brian excited too. He does the difficult stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
It's the simple stuff that needs to be honed and worked on. Right. And like when Brian was talking about the feet and, things like that. He's so much better when he's getting pressured than when he's got a clean pocket right now, and which is kind of scary. But those are all things that you can work on. Those are things that you can get better. And so he's a lot closer to reaching his potential than guys are that stink when they're getting pressured. Right. Because it's easier to fix the other stuff than it is to be able to drop your arm angle and do a lot of the things that we saw in the Gator Bowl, which he did really, really well. It's a lot harder to fix that stuff than it is to fix the stuff that it looks like he needs to work on, which is the clean pocket stuff. So he's a lot closer than a lot of people think he is what I will say.
Well, I mean, Vince, if you took his Gator Bowl numbers, just to put into context the production he had in the Gator Bowl.
Yeah.
If Tyler Buchner just averaged that over the course of a season, just averaged what he did in the Gator Bowl, 274 passing yards. That goes to 3,562 yards over the course of the season. 61 rushing yards goes to 793 yards for the course of an entire season. That's really good production. And then, of course, 2 touchdowns would get him to 26 rushing touchdowns. He's not going to have 26 rushing touchdowns. Right. But if you just went 5 touchdowns and put that over the course of the season, that's let's see here. 5 times 13 is 65 touchdowns. He's not going to have 65 touchdowns.
No.
But the point is he's a guy that can get you 3 to 4 touchdowns a game.
Yes. And
with his arms or his leg, and is going to get you over 4,000 yards of offense. That's
pretty good.
That's how I see Tyler Buchner.
Yeah.
And he's impacting the game in a way that looks a lot like what Kyler Murray did.
Right.
Where you think you got him beat, and then all of a sudden he just drops his arm angle and makes some stupid throw.
Right.
That you're like, how do you defend that? You can't. The only way you can defend that is if you beat the receiver. And that's it. And so that's what he can be. How close is he? He's pretty far off right now. Just because of of what we know.
Yeah.
You can't take this Gator Bowl. Like, here's the mistake fans are making. One of two. One is to completely ignore the Gator Bowl because you're still obsessed with what happened against Marshall. Okay, it is what it is. I don't know what to tell you. And the other one is to look at the Gator Bowl and ignore the interceptions and ignore Marshall and go there. Both are wrong. They're both part of the learning process for Tyler Buchner. Now the question is, okay, Tyler, you showed what you can do from a playmaking standpoint. Now clean up the other stuff. Because here's the thing. If he just does 3 simple things correctly, just read the 4 verts properly and just throw the easiest seam route you could ever throw to a wide open Mitchell Evans, you've got a 40-yard touchdown, right? If you just drop that ball off to Chris Tyree on the little quick wheel, he's at least getting you 25 more yards, if not another touchdown. Just 2 mechanical mistakes and one mechanical mistake and 1 easy read mistake, and all of a sudden he's got 350 yards and another touchdown.
Just like that.
Right? And then just on that last one is with more experience, no matter what you think of the call from Tommy Rees, it's not a good call. But a more experienced quarterback sees that the look isn't there, and he throws it away. You live to fight another day. It's second down. It was first down.
Right.
And so and I'm not blaming Tyler, that call should not have been made, right? But you can get away with making that call with a more experienced quarterback because he's going to see this isn't the look we wanted. He's going to process that really quickly and say, okay, not the look we wanted. So I got to go to my secondary to throw away because I can't go to my primary. My primary is covered because that linebacker came over and they had another guy there, safety there. The primary is covered. So I got to look to my secondary. And if the secondary is not there, I'm throwing it away and we're going second and goal from 7. Right. So those things will be worked out with more experience from Tyler, or should be worked out with more experience from Tyler.
Right.
And that's when he starts to get into that potential.
Sure.
But I just don't know when that's going to come. And if it does, then can you keep him healthy for 13 games doing it? That's
a whole other
concerns.
conversation too.
The kid has immense potential. Immense potential.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Can't believe my eyes. Says, do the graduate transfers immediately enter school when the semester starts and join all the off-season training programs? How is that different from a freshman transfer, as an example? I don't think there's any difference whatsoever.
Well, yeah. Matter of fact, it tends to be it can at times be even more challenging for a graduate or a guy that's about to graduate. So, for example, if you remember Lawrence Keys after last season, he couldn't transfer to Tulane until the summer because he wanted to stay at Notre Dame and graduate. Degree. So he had to stay in that spring to graduate. For a guy like Sam Hartman, for example, he's going to be here next week,
right?
When they are enroll. So 9 days, so a week and a half. He'll be there for all the winter workouts, all the spring ball, all summer workouts.
If a freshman was going to transfer, like let's say Anthony Lucas, as an example, I'm not getting people excited. If he was going to transfer over as a true freshman, he could start on the 17th whenever class starts and be good, and he would be there the exact same amount of time.
Right.
So it doesn't really change.
If you're not going to graduate, you're there in the spring.
Yes.
You're there in the spring for graduates. And that's what it appears to me that Can't Believe My Eyes understands that. And that's why the question was asked about graduates.
Right.
So in the instance of the guys that they're going after, I believe Spencer Schrader, the punter whose name escapes me right now, and Sam Hartman and Caleb Smith are all already graduated.
So they'll
be are going to be here in the spring. Right. I anticipate all of them being part of the spring.
Yeah.
So very good question.
Some awesome punting and kicking in the spring.
We had some great questions today, Vince.
Well, I think that's about to take a turn. Here we go. Okay. Stone Ader says, if Hartman starts for us next year, can we expect a large influx of female Notre Dame fans? Have to admit, Freeman and Hartman are both pretty good-looking dudes.
Why is this a bad question, Vince?
I don't know. It's just a weird one is all.
Okay. Well, first of all, we don't know if Stone Adore is a male or a female.
That's fair. I don't think it matters. Whatever.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, look, as a husband, I can't deny that what the quarterback looks like is something that's going to, like, if Brady Quinn didn't look like Brady Quinn, I don't know if my wife would have wanted to name our first dog Brady. I'm just going to be honest with you. Okay. She's never been like, let's name him Jimmy or Clausen, right? She knows that. I mean, and that's who the quarterback was when she and I met, was Jimmy Clausen, not Brady Quinn, right?
That's funny.
So I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, part of me wants to kind of, be like, women love the game too. And okay, I get that. And they do, but it doesn't mean like, it's like saying if you had really hot cheerleaders, would more men attend? I mean, I'd be kind of naive if I said that didn't matter. Otherwise, why do they have cheerleaders? You know what I mean?
Why does USC have those what do they call them? The song girls.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Lakers and the showgirls, right? I mean, it is what it is. Yeah. It's part of the game. I don't personally care for it, but I'm a dork who just likes the nerdy stuff of the game. You know what I mean? But I think other people like that stuff. It'll be some. I don't think that stuff matters as much as football as it does in other sports. Just because he's going to be at the game with his helmet on the whole time.
Right. Well, here's where it matters. NIL.
Jersey, yeah, and jersey sales.
Yeah, NIL. I mean, they like we talked about it. Was it with you and me, or was it me and Sean? I can't even remember about what could Brady Quinn have gotten an NIL if they had it when he was around. He would have been rolling. He would have been like Scrooge McDuck, just diving into his coins, like because he's a good-looking dude and he's well-spoken and all of that. There's a reason that he has the job he has now.
Yeah,
I mean, let's be honest. So yeah, I mean, it matters. I don't know if it's going to bring more fans, but I think it'll help his NIL deals. I'll just say that. All right, back to some football stuff. Pat Kowalski says, if we were to go to a 3-3-5, could a guy like Barnes or Tucker find any playing time in a role outside of true corner? If you're talented, you should get some reps and not collect dust on the sidelines.
I mean, that's true, but at the same time, you have 7 talented corners. You can't play 7 corners on defense.
Exactly.
You just can't do it. But to your question, Pat, I do think there could be a role there because, and this is what I've been saying this for over a week now. If Chance Tucker and Ryan Barnes, just one of them, has a really strong offseason and forces his way to say, dude, this guy's got to be part of the rotation, right? He's not going to beat out Cam. He's not going to beat out Benjamin, barring injury.
Right.
But you know what he can do? Is he can go out there and say, hey, look, we don't have to play Cam every single snap. We can give him every third series off to let him, stay fresh and all that kind of stuff. And maybe there's certain games where you just can't afford to take Cam off the game. Like Ohio State game, can't take Cam off the field. But if you can then take him off the field as part of rotation against Navy and against Tennessee State and against Central Michigan, because Chance is really playing well, and then he can kind of maybe play both, where he can also give Benjamin a spell, or maybe Barnes gives Ryan a spell, or Cam a spell, and then Chance gives Benjamin a spell, or Jaden Mickey gives Benjamin a spell. All of a sudden, you've got a fresher group. That also then this is why we've advocated for moving Clarence Lewis to safety, because you do have, if those guys emerge, because right now you've got 3 corners that you can play with. Jaden Mickey, Benjamin Morrison, and Cam Hart. That's what you have. If Chance proves himself ready to play, or Barnes, it'd be nice if it's both, or if one of the freshmen does, then you know what? Now all of a sudden you can move Clarence Lewis because you can find a role for those guys.
Right.
And the other thing, too, is we did see Chance Tucker in the bowl game on special teams. And I've heard that he had a very strong finish to the season. So we did see him a little bit in the bowl game on special teams. So I would love to see more of Chance Tucker at cornerback. I really would, because I think it'd help keep guys fresh, and it would help you move Clarence Lewis because if they both step up. And the other thing, too, is Ryan Barnes could help you at safety if the need arose, because he's a pretty physical kid, too, if he's able to, be ready to play and all those type of things. So, yes, I would be very interested to see those guys emerge, because I think – and I don't think – look, the 3-3-5 part doesn't matter to me because that only affects the box. A 4-2-5 is structurally from a secondary standpoint is no different than a 3-3-5.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Lucas says, what is your take on Byron Vaughns and his potential fit in Notre Dame's defense? Former edge player at Utah State, but fits more of a linebacker/pass rusher in Notre Dame's system.
Yeah, I don't know if he fits that role at Notre Dame, to be completely honest with you. I mean, I know that's kind of what he did there, but I think he's more of a kind of a big end at what Notre Dame does. Maybe some Viper here. I don't know. Look, here's the deal. He's super long and he's got some twitchiness to him, but he's a really raw football player.
Yeah.
So he's a depth guy that you're taking a flyer on him, hoping that the light goes on. Is really what you're doing.
Graduate?
I believe he is. Yes.
Okay. So he's been doing it for a little while. Okay.
Yeah, but he's very raw. He was actually better in 2021 than he was this past year, production-wise and play-wise and all of that. Last year, he had 10.5 tackles for loss. He's like 6'5", 6'4", 6'5", 240, 235. He had 10.5 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. This year, he only had 8.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. In 2019, as a freshman, he played 10 games and had 14 tackles. So, and he's a guy, Vince, that you're taking a flyer on. He's super long.
Yeah. Like
super long. He's more of here's the thing. He's a Viper kind of body, but his game isn't that of a Viper, in my opinion, at least from what little I've seen. I got to watch a lot more film of him. And I do believe Notre Dame is looking at him, but there's some other guys too that I think they like a tad more, to be honest with you. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Next up is Domer Grizz. After Joe Alt goes pro after next year, should Blake Fisher come back and play left tackle as a senior? First of all, he'd be a senior. Would that boost his draft stock, and would the staff do that and give Wagner a year at right tackle before sliding him over?
I would. Yeah. I mean, I kind of, well, number one, I think that's what Harry has done, right, in the past.
Mm-hmm.
It would partly depend on what does Blake want to do. Like if Blake's like, no, I like where I'm at. I want to come out and have a really dominant year where I'm at in 2024, leave him there and then let your left tackles battle it out. But I think what we've seen in the past from Notre Dame, I mean, this has kind of been how Harry did it. You know, he started Ronnie Stanley in 2013, started at right tackle with Zach Martin at left tackle. Zach graduates. He puts him at left tackle, puts Ronnie at left tackle. McGlinchey's playing right tackle, eventually starts in the bowl game at right tackle, comes out in 2015. You got Stanley at left tackle, McGlinchey at right tackle, and they're dominant. 16, you move McGlinchey over to left tackle, and he's kind of your next left tackle. Liam Eichenberg kind of started his career at right tackle because, you know, maybe potentially stepping in. Tommy Kramer, same thing. Eventually, Liam moves to left tackle to play left tackle. But he never started at right tackle, but he played it. If you remember, I think it was 2017, I believe Liam got in the game several times at right tackle, not left tackle. I believe I have to go back and look at that, but I'm pretty sure that that's what my memory tells me. So we've seen that in the past. We've certainly seen that in the past with Harry Hiestand offensive lines. And so it wouldn't surprise me if we see that again this way. And I'd be fine with it. But it just depends on Blake and what you think he can do and what you think he'd be willing to do.
Right.
But I mean, if Blake's coming back in 2024, I would absolutely look to give him a shot at left tackle. I think he can play it. I think he's plenty athletic enough and long enough and powerful enough to play it, Vince. I don't know about you. I think the only reason Blake Fisher's not playing left tackle right now is because arguably the second best tackle in college football, arguably, is on that team with him. I mean, I think Peter Skoronski is probably the best left tackle in college football, in my opinion, the kid from Northwestern. But I think after that, there's a debate that Joe Alt needs to be a part of.
Yeah.
That's the only reason Blake's not playing left tackle now is because of that. So I think he can play it. It's just in this team, I think he could be a dominant right tackle. There's no need to whereas I don't think Joe's a dominant right tackle the way that Blake can be. So, yeah, I would strongly consider it. Good question. Yeah, I would. And I shouldn't do this because I have no evidence of it. But I mean, I would assume that Joe Alt leaves after next year if he plays the way he did this year.
Yeah, if he keeps ascending the way he has been.
But that's just my opinion. I have no intel to back that up. That's just
he can stay. Who knows?
Me and Vince giving our opinions. He may view himself as a guy that needs a fourth year under Harry Hiestand. Maybe he does. Maybe the NFL tells him you're a top 15 pick, and he thinks coming back 24 makes him a top 5 pick. There's so much that we don't know.
Sure,
but I mean, if you're Notre Dame, you've got to prepare yourself for him not to be back.
Absolutely.
And then if he decides to come back,
great. Thumbs up. Let's roll.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a super chat here from Raymond Harton. No question, but just a super chat. So thank you very much, Raymond. Really appreciate that very much. Tyler Evans with a super chat. Thank you, sir. Happy Friday, guys. Fun question. Biggest upset in college football? One regular season game and one bowl game. And P.S. I was happy for the Mississippi State bowl win.
Yeah, I was too. As much as I dislike the SEC and like it when the SEC loses, I was happy to see Mississippi State get that win.
Sure.
Yeah, I was.
So he's asking for the regular season, so upsets, I guess, for games that already happened.
Is this all time or this year? I mean, biggest upset in college football history. I mean, to me, it's got to be App State over Michigan, right? I mean,
that was great.
Not even taking a shot at Michigan. I mean, that was an FCS team, and great. Okay, but I'm trying to have a rational conversation right here. Michigan was coming off a 2006 season. Weren't they Vince, 2006, the year was 2007 when they beat them, right?
They were coming off of it. They were like a top 10 team, I want to say.
Yeah, because the year before is when the game was 1 versus 2.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, and they had a really good team coming back. So, and then App State beat them was like that. To me, that has to be. I don't think it's the biggest point spread upset. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, but say biggest upset in college football history. Let's see what it is if they have it like by spreads and stuff. But yeah, I think that would be one for me. Vince would be the big upset. Biggest one in the bowl game. That's a good one. There was one that I was thinking. I mean, like I don't count Boise over Oklahoma State. Oklahoma as a major upset. I'll say this: 2008 when Utah beat Alabama. I don't know what the spread was of that game, but I do remember it being like just Bama was this great team and all that kind of stuff. You know what? Another game that I just remembered it might be an even bigger upset, Vince.
Okay.
Remember when Stanford beat USC in 2007? Stanford sucked that year. They lost to Notre Dame in 2007, and they beat USC. That's a pretty. I think Tavika Pritchard was the quarterback in that game. That's a big upset. Well, bowl game, Vince. Did you have one that you wanted?
Well, from a spread standpoint, it wasn't a huge upset. But when Texas beat USC, that was a big one. That was a big one. That was the Rose Bowl. Vince Young, the whole unstoppable USC team. That was a fun one for sure. It was a good game, but I also believe that was an upset, right?
Yeah. I mean, USC was definitely the favorite, but I don't think it was
right. That's what I'm saying. I don't think it was
a
huge spread situation, but I think it was still an upset. I think everybody kind of had USC crowned at that point.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of some more. I'd have to think about that one time. That's a good one. But yeah, the FBS on FBS crime, that would be Stanford USC 07 for me. That was a pretty big one. That was a pretty big one.
Stuff.
But overall, I got to go with the App State one. I really do.
Right.
Yeah.
Irish Blooded. What's your go-to karaoke song?
So I started this one because this is going to sound bad. I've never done karaoke.
Me neither.
I've been at karaoke place. I've never personally done karaoke.
No, I haven't either.
Yeah.
So I don't really have. I mean,
I'm more here's the funny thing is I used to be it's going to be funny. I probably shouldn't say this. So when I was in elementary school, I was part of a singing group in elementary school that at the school went to. It's called Kids from Bath, and we'd travel all over. It was a school thing, and we'd sing. And that was how we went to my first trip to Washington, D.C. But I've never liked how I sang. I used to sing in church all the time as a kid, my grandma's church. But when I went through puberty, I didn't like how I sounded when I sang. So now nobody hears me sing. I don't like singing in front of people. So I've never done karaoke, not even as a joke. Like I'm just I don't know why. Like me, Vince. I don't mind being in front of people. I talk. I'd give speeches. I'd give all. But singing in front of people is
terrified for me.
There's only one person that's heard me sing in the last decade, and that's my wife. And that's even as a joke. My
wife tells me to stop singing all the time, but I sing all the time at home.
Our wives are a little bit different. So
that's fair. Yes. I sing all the time and I get yelled at.
But I do it as a joke, like just messing with her. Like, there's a song that remember the Stevie Wonder song I just called? Right? Yeah. So when my wife's out of town, I'll call and sing that to her. Just makes her feel better, but nobody else gets to hear that. I'm mortified of singing in front of people.
I've never sung karaoke myself. And I mean, there's certain songs I could do and I would sound terrible, I'm sure, but I know all the words, like I could do it, but I don't know. I don't know what the answer
I'd probably have
to
some fun, do like a Michael Jackson song or something like that, just do a bunch of Michael Jackson moves or.
I could be super corny and just do what everybody does, like a Piano Man. Like that's an easy one,
In Sync, Bye Bye Bye. Do that one.
Baby.
That's you, Ryan and Sean. I just got this visual of you.
Oh my gosh!
At the IB Carrot Christmas party, you, Ryan and Sean doing In Sync, Bye Bye Bye. I got to see it now. I got to see it now. I got to see it.
Maybe we'll do it for our get together during spring ball, like we had last year. We'll have to do that.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Rob, Brian, and Vince, do you think Sam Hartman plays in the spring game, or will the QB play be mostly Buckner and the younger guys?
Oh, I think they'll all need to play. Look, Sam Hartman's going to need every opportunity he can to get on the same page with players. Would I play him the whole game? No. But I definitely play him the full first quarter, if not the whole first half.
First half for me. I think it's Buckner versus but like Buckner
that's
on one
what it would
side,
be for me.
Hartman on the other side. Like that. Because you don't actually face off against each other. I hate when they always say it's quarterback versus quarterback. It's not. But like I would have those two on opposite teams for the first half. And then the second half, it's Angeli and Minchie. And then I'll give the last series to Paulus to hand off to the walk-ons. Yeah. But other than that, that's what I would do for the spring game. I mean, you can have whatever rules you want. It doesn't have to be offense versus defense. And, I would try to stack it up as best I could and even it up.
Yeah.
That's the whole first half for me.
Yep.
So absolutely he plays. Unless there's an injury, unless somebody, gets hurt walking down the stairs again or whatever. All right, couldn't help myself.
I know.
All right. Call Me Ty says, what is your ideal base defensive lineup for 23? Do you think it will be different in the future?
Oh, I don't. I mean, it's, again, let me see what the roster looks like. I could give you an answer now, and in 2 days they get a transfer and it completely changes. Like, what is your ideal base defensive lineup? I'm personally a fan of the 4-2-5. I think a 4-2-5, 3-3-5 hybrid with Botelho and Burnham as your Viper is probably the ideal based on what we know right now, right? And more of a true nickel defense. I don't want to see a 3 linebacker defense next year unless that third linebacker is one of the Botelho Burnham combination. I don't want to see it.
I agree.
Let Jack Kaiser battle for one of the inside jobs if he wants it.
Right.
But that's
what I would do too. I would move him
inside.
Now
you need to have that as a look at times. There's times where the base defense where now you're kind of more of like a 4-2, a 4-3 personnel or 3-4 personnel, not typical, edge rusher 3-4, but just, Bill Belichick old school 3-4, but just 3-4 personnel. There's a time and a place for that, but it would not be my base defense like it is this year.
Yep, I agree with that completely. Johnny from the Boot says, with the additions and possibly future additions from the portal, how do you think Freeman or Brian and Vince gets down to 85-man roster? The 85-man roster thing pretty much always takes care of itself.
Right.
And I know you've got an article that you update all the time with the current
I'm actually
scholarships.
Literally updating it right now as we're talking.
It should be 90, I do believe, after yesterday. I think yesterday made it 89, and then, of course, they brought in the grad transfer, so that makes it 90. Right. There's going to be more defections from Notre Dame's team. Correct. Whether it's forced or otherwise, between now and August, there's going to be guys leaving. Right. And then that by
some
itself,
of it'll be after the spring.
Right. Absolutely. And that by itself will get them down to about where they need to be. And then there's always, every year, it seems like somebody goes on a medical that maybe we weren't anticipating. It's not, I can't flat out give you names of guys that are going to not be on the roster between now and then, but it always works itself out. They're very cognizant of where they are with a numbers situation. Are they at 90, Brian? Does that sound right?
I have them at 89.
89
is where I have them, but I have some guys off the roster that other people.
But Justin was on the roster yesterday. Now he's off, so it's a 1-for-1.
So getting Hartman put him back up to 90 from what I have.
Yeah,
and So I added Davis Sherwood from my original article because I thought he was still a walk on, but he's not a walk. He's not there anymore. Speaking of the only person that I sing in front of. We were just talking about me and karaoke and how I don't sing in front of anyone. You're the only person that I sing in front of. So, she's laughing.
Those chuckles in the background.
She does. So, but that's where I'm at now, scholarship wise.
Yeah. Okay. And that sounds right. Like I said, it all takes care of itself, and everybody's always worried about how they get to where they need to get to, and they always do.
She was like, "Are you guys doing a show right now? Like, why are you talking about?" She didn't know we were doing the mailbag today. Like, why are you talking about karaoke?
Because
she's all, me and you were BSing. That's what she was like.
That's what we do.
Because she sneaks down here all quietly and she brings me tea, right? Yeah. Because she's sweet like that. So she thought me and you were just talking. So
it's great.
She's like, "Are you doing a show?" Yes. Yeah. So it's
our buddy John A1, he says, now that Brennan Vernon is down to 259 pounds at 6'5", he has a very similar height and weight profile to Riley Mills. Do they have similar games, or are they worlds apart?
Oh, I think they're different players. I think Riley, there's some similarities. They're not worlds apart. It's in between. I think Brennan Vernon's going to end up looking a lot like Riley Mills. Maybe not quite. Riley's a little bit naturally thicker. Riley's like 295 inch. You've stood next to him. He's just huge.
Mm-hmm.
He's just everything. He's just he's not fat. He's just huge.
Yes.
Brennan is more naturally 265-ish. He'd have to bulk up to get to 285, 290, and I think he will. I think he's going to have that that boom. Like Riley had. When Riley quits playing football, he'll lose weight. All guys hopefully
absolutely
do. So,
yeah. It's amazing what former offensive linemen look like.
Oh, yeah.
When they're about 3
I've said
years.
this before. Mike McGlinchey, about 2 years after he's done playing football, is going to look like a different dude. I don't even recognize Joe Thomas when I see him on TV now. Like,
Right.
who's that dude? They're like, that's Joe Thomas. Who's Joe Thomas? Like, the guy that played for the Browns. I'm like, that's not him.
Yeah,
exactly. That guy's like $1.225. That's not him.
It's amazing.
You know,
it's amazing what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just kind of look at it and you know, Vince, for me, it's similar body types, but their games are different. I think Brennan's going to end up being an inside guy.
Yes.
I think he's going to be really good in tight quarters as a power guy. I think Riley's body fits an inside guy, but his game matches more of an outside guy to me. At least it has so far.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of see how that one continues to play out.
Archer, our resident Ohio State fan, says lots of hype around Michigan and Penn State going into 23. With Ohio State being perennially a preseason top 5 team, what are the chances the Big Ten has 3 of the top 6 preseason teams? Penn State being a top 6 team?
I mean, it may happen, but I don't think it should. I think Penn State was, I'll say this again, vastly overrated this year, like all year. They beat Utah mainly because Utah was missing 2 of their best players and their quarterback got hurt. And their backup quarterback was terrible. You know, Penn State will be overrated next year. Michigan, I mean, is Jim Harbaugh going to be their coach?
Right.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I got to see some things, but I mean, look, I would imagine Ohio State and Michigan are being that conversation for top 5. I got to go look at, you know, who's the SEC team they're going to overhype and put in the top 6 this year, right? Like it was A&M this year. It was, you know, last 2 years. It's like, who's that going to be? It's going to be LSU. Like, I think LSU is going to be way overhyped in the preseason polls next year for what a 4-team should, you know, 4-loss team should be, that they got their brains beat in as often as LSU did in their losses. So, I mean, you know, they'll probably be overhyped. I mean, I would have LSU as a borderline top 10 team next year, but I could see them like having them like
they'll be top 5.
Yes,
they'll be top 5.
Right. Like them and Notre Dame should be around the same place for me, in my opinion, with what we know of who's coming back for LSU, and you're looking at their schedule.
Sure.
You know, but that's just kind of how it is.
Yeah.
Michigan, you know, like, because I got to go, like, how many linemen does Michigan lose? That's a question that I have. You know, how many defensive guys? I know they're going to lose some, but not a ton. You know, is Blake Corum come back or not? I got to know that question. You know, so there's just some stuff I got to know. But if they get most of the guys back that are expected to be back, you know, honestly, Michigan deserves to be a top 5 team. I mean, look, if we're looking at this objectively, not as Notre Dame fans who hate Michigan, but if we're looking at this objectively, Vince, they've been in the playoff 2 years in a row, and they're going to return potentially a big chunk of their starting lineup. If Notre Dame was in the same boat, we'd be advocating that they be a top 5 team. Right. Can you at least say it that way? You know, I mean, so I think they earned it more than Ohio State has the last 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I think because Ohio State doesn't bring their quarterback back, I think you could make a case that Michigan deserves to be top 5. If only one Big Ten team is going to be in the top 5, I think Michigan deserves that based on what we know of right now.
I don't like it, but it's true. Right. I agree with you 100%. True. I agree with you 100%. I don't know that they will deserve it from the way they will end up playing throughout the year, but
that's not
season's about the past. Like it's
back-to-back playoff team that is the back-to-back Big Ten champ, back-to-back playoff team that is returning a bunch of guys from their lineup.
Yeah,
sure, they deserve it.
How
will it play out? We'll find out.
Yeah.
And their schedule's still soft. I mean, Vince, their schedule next year isn't a whole lot harder than this. Let me look it up because it was. I looked at it the other day. It's a little harder than this one, but it's not by much. Their schedule next year, they start off with the mighty Pirates of East Carolina. Then they play UNLV at home. Then they play Bowling Green. When was the last time Michigan played a road game out of conference? I'm very curious about that. Was it Notre Dame in 2018? Has it really been that long?
Long time. They didn't leave.
Then they have a home game against the Scarlet Knights of Rutgers, at Nebraska, at Minnesota, home against Indiana, at Michigan State, home against Purdue, at Penn State, at Maryland, home against Michigan. Pretty soft schedule outside of a couple good teams at the top.
Sure.
We'll see what Nebraska's made of next year. That'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But, you know, I mean, that's kind of how I look at it, Vince. Is just
I agree.
You know,
99 problems, but BK ain't one. Brian, you aren't worried about Viper. What are you worried about position wise, and why? Also, how do you feel about a 3-3-5 versus a 4-2-5 versus a 4-3? You kind of explained that last one.
Well, I'll just touch on it again a little bit, Vince. For me, I'm worried about the interior of the defensive line, just because that's a position I don't like playing a lot of young guys. So how will those young guys handle themselves? Like, will Onye, will Rubio, will they really step into prominent roles? Will they get a transfer or not? I don't love big end right now. Like, to me, Nana has got to be more of a rotation guy, not a starter for me on a championship team. But you may not be able to do that if Riley Mills has to move inside. So you went out and lost Braden Fisk. That would have been huge for Notre Dame. Huge for Notre Dame, because him and Riley could have been basically interchangeable in the same rotation. One's at 3 technique, one's here, and that was a big loss. And the other was a big end, and you can rotate them. That was a huge loss, inexcusable loss in my opinion.
Right.
So there's just a lot of that, Vince, for me, of a lot of question marks there. Linebacker has to remain a question until they prove me otherwise. I think JD was a lot better than people give him credit for this year. I think Jack had his moments, but there was other times where he was just not a factor or struggled. Finished the year well, and then Maris was just not good. And Prince Colley's had some issues staying healthy during his tenure as well, which is a problem. So linebacker is a big question mark for me.
My biggest.
I'm not worried about safety as long as everybody stays healthy.
Right.
That's the key. Because if Ramon, Xavier, and DJ Brown next year, which is what I expect the safety rotation to be, with Adon Schuler and Ben Minich, I feel like if everybody stays healthy, that's not a whole lot different than what your safety rotation was this year. When Brandon Joseph was out, you're missing Houston Griffith, who's a solid player this year. But Thomas Harper is a similar player. Adon Schuler can give you some of the things that Houston did style play wise, just not the experience that Houston had.
Right.
So as long as everybody stays healthy, but see, that's the rub.
Yeah, as long as.
Right, that's the rub.
And you're walking a fine line, right? I mean, that's
bingo.
We talked about that with the wide receiver room. As long as everybody stayed healthy, they were good to go. And then Avery Davis went down, right? I mean,
and then Joe Wilkins got hurt.
Joe Wilkins got hurt. Yeah,
and absolutely. Then Tobias or Dion was not healthy to start the season.
Right. So I mean, as long as they stay healthy, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Then you're fine there. But I agree.
Yep.
Ray Holcraft.
Second part of that question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I still got it. There it is.
Look, personally, I'm a 4-2-5 guy. That's what I like. And I would prefer a safety type of guy at that spot, or a really long rover, a 6'3", gangly armed guy, or a 6'1", gangly armed guy like Jeremiah Usu-Koroma, that kind of guy at rover, or a safety at rover. That's what I prefer. Mm-hmm. That's just me. But I'm also someone who's always said, I don't really care what you do as long as you know how to coach it and you know how to teach the fundamentals of it, and as long as you recruit to it. Like, if you're if you're a coach trying to implement a 4-2-5 and you don't have the personnel for it, I hate your defense. Even though it's my personal preference for defense. If you're a guy that can recruit the heck out of a 3-3-5 and you know how to coach it, teach it, and use it, I love it, even though it wouldn't be what I would go with if I was a head coach. And I could, in a perfect world, what do I want to instill? Every school is different. You have to know what you can and cannot recruit to that school. And that's what Notre Dame's got to figure out. What are the body types that you can recruit to this school right now? And if is the issues that you're having coach related, or it's just a position we're always going to have a hard time with related. And so that's what you got to figure out. 4-3 to me is a dead defense.
Yeah. It's just not athletic enough. It's just not.
Well, it's too condensed.
There. Yeah, right.
I mean,
and that's what I mean by that. You've got to be able to go horizontal as well as vertical.
Right.
And the old school 4-3 with like a Sam and a Will and like what those guys, what those body types were, that just you're gonna
I just don't know what offense would you use that against?
Right.
Navy, Army, Air Force.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
And Wisconsin, it's not even going to do that anymore. I mean, there's a couple teams here and there that are still that kind of powerful. Michigan,
and there's
use it against Michigan.
Yeah, there's times when I would use it within a game, right? Within the construct of a game, if a team wants to go heavy, that kind of
Marcus
thing.
Freeman did that against Georgia in the Peach Bowl a couple years ago.
Yes, right.
And that helped them shut down Georgia's run game. Only gave up like 40-some yards.
So I have no problem with it in parts, but for that to be your base defense, I think that those days are gone. Those days are gone. You might still see it in high school just because of what the offenses are running and things like that. But no, I'm with you 100%. I don't. It's just a dead defense as a base. As a base, it's a dead defense.
Yeah, agree.
Even though I loved it at the time.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
Well, the 4-3 is now the 4-2-5.
Yes,
because
I agree with you.
Like the way that Notre Dame does it, because you have a Jack Kaiser there or a Jeremiah Wusu or a Drew Tranquil there that can easily slide inside if you're playing a team that plays a lot of 12 personnel or run heavy stuff or fullback or whatever the case may be.
Correct. It's easy to
an
go
old school
that.
where because your Sam used to be like a 6'3", 240-pound guy, Vince.
Yes.
That guy's now a Mike. The Mikes are now Wills, or the Mikes are now Vipers, right? And the Wills are now
Rovers.
Safeties.
Or safeties.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to now.
Absolutely.
I mean, generally speaking, it's obviously a very broad. It's not true for everybody, but that's a lot of times that's what it's kind of turned into.
Ray wants to know, how does a team effectively stop the run out of a 3-3-5 defensive alignment? And we touched on this a little bit.
Here's one of the common misconceptions about a 3-3-5. If you know what you're doing with it, and depending on the person, like the reason the Big 12 teams struggle with 3-3-5 for so long is because they were undersized. And they were forced to spread out. It's how they felt they could handle the wide open offenses. And so they'd play teams that could run the football and they just get gashed.
Yeah.
But a 3-3-5 when done right, and I think TCU had a pretty good 3-3-5. People say, oh, Michigan ran all over them. No, they didn't. Michigan ran for 180 yards. 50 some of that came in the first play of the game. And then about at least 40 or 50 of that were quarterback scrambles in the pass game.
Right.
So they did not do it. But here's the deal. No matter what defense you're doing, you have to have gap integrity. That's the reality of it. And a 3-3-5 stops the run because you have gap integrity. You have gap, every gap is being accounted for. You have safeties protecting the second level players, just like you do in a 4-2-5, and you're hitting your gaps. Every time a 3-3-5 team sees the run, there's going to be at least 4 guys hitting the line of scrimmage. No different than a 4-2-5.
Right.
And a lot of times it's going to be a 5th guy is going to insert. The difference is you're getting to it from depth. You're getting to it with a different body type. And that's where you can kind of have some issues is if you're a 3-3-5 team, what TCU did a good job of against Michigan. And when their run defense is good, it's because their linebackers are getting into the gaps. When teams run on them is when they're able to kind of run certain concepts where they're able to stone those linebackers, and then they're done because they're not big enough to push through like a defensive lineman is. But that's also true if you're double teaming a 3 technique and you blow him off the ball. It's the same kind of concept. Mm-hmm. So if you've got to have really creative stunts to be effective there. You can't, the defense can't, the offense can't always know which backer is going to occupy which gap. And so unless you've just got butt kickers in your front 3, that's the thing that can help you is if you're going to be a 3-3-5 that's going to be a dominant run defense, you need dudes at the 2 end spots.
Yep.
That to me is even more important than nose tackle. You've got to have straight dudes there that are occupying double teams and all that kind of stuff so your linebackers can kind of run free. And so I think that's a very important piece of it. And that's what TCU did against Michigan. Their linebackers are just beating the Michigan front blockers off the ball.
Yes.
Getting them under their pads, getting them to their side, and Michigan couldn't do anything about it after that first play. And that's how you got to be. Now, it's harder to be consistent with that.
Right.
That's the danger of a 3-3-5. There's just going to be some games where you just get gashed a few times because that other team has an idea, or you miss a couple times. It's much more of a high risk, high reward run defense.
Agreed.
But if you do it right, you can have success with it, in my opinion, against base personnel. Now, against 12 personnel and stuff like that, you better have answers.
Right.
And that's what Freeman did in the Peach Bowl. We were just talking about it. Whenever Georgia was in 11 personnel, Cincinnati would stay in their base personnel, 3-3-5 personnel. But the minute Georgia went 12 personnel or brought in a fullback, Cincinnati immediately checked with them to their 4-3 personnel immediately. So they just tried to match personnel with them because they knew when Georgia goes 12 personnel, we don't physically match up against the run. We can't. So they switched to 4-3 personnel. You can do that in a bowl game. That's harder to do
on a consistent basis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
hard to have enough practice time.
Because and then teams are scheming against that, etc. That was not something that Georgia was able to scheme against because it was a bowl game and obviously the obvious stuff.
Right.
All right. Douglas Road Roundabouts. That's funny. Have you ever eaten at Corn Dance Tavern? I'm taking my wife there for a steak dinner on her birthday in February.
Is that the one over on Grape?
It is on Grape. Yeah,
I've never been there before.
It's right. I believe it's right next to like Outback and that.
Yeah, it's over
neighborhood.
by. Yeah, I've never eaten there before.
I have never eaten there. My daughter has eaten there 4 or 5 times. That's where it pays
Which
to have
one?
rich friends.
One of the twins or
Ella? Yeah.
Okay.
Friend she goes over, spends the night with all the time. They go there all the time. She's like, yeah, Dad, it's okay. But she's not a steak lover. So, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, my dad's not really a steak lover. He'll eat a steak, but he's not really a steak lover either. It's kind of
I've heard that it's good, but it is out of my price range to take a 7 top, which would be my family, to Corn Dance. So, good luck, sir. Let us know how it goes.
Yeah, be curious.
Keith, does Notre Dame bring DJ Brown back just for numbers?
No. They'll bring him back to be part of the rotation.
You don't bring somebody back just to be a number. At least
you don't bring a guy like him back.
Yeah.
To just be a number.
Yeah.
In my opinion, no.
Agree with you. But we haven't heard either way yet, right? About DJ?
Haven't heard officially, but I anticipate him coming back.
Okay. All right.
As of right now, yes.
Call me Ty. If you could pick one of these 3 to have an All-American season, who would be the most impactful? Merriweather, Patelho, Sneed.
Ooh. I think for me, as much as I want to say Merriweather, I'd have to go Patelho. Just because if they can get an All-American edge rusher next year, like Notre Dame, I believe, with the run game they have, can have a great offense without one guy being an 80-catch, 1,400-yard guy, which is what you need to be an All-American.
Absolutely. It's stat-driven.
Right. If Merriweather next year has 50 catches for 800 yards and he's their leading receiver, but the offense is really dynamic because Deion's making plays and they're just spreading the love around, totally fine with that.
Yeah.
But if Tobias has a monster season, but Notre Dame can't get after the quarterback, it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
They're still going to be 10-2. So I would say if Patelho or Josh Burnham, like whoever the Viper is, and right now I think it's going to be Patelho right now, if he comes out and has an All-American season, that means because think about this. Isaiah Foskey was an All-American this year. He wasn't last year. So only one of his 10-plus sack years did he make All-American. With any, I think he made like a 3rd team or something like that last year. But I think his All-American honor this year was off reputation. My point being, for Jordan Patelho to go from some dude that nobody nationally really knows about to an All-American means he has a monster season.
Yeah.
And that would be huge for the Notre Dame. I mean, I'm not talking like 12 tackles for loss, 11 sacks like Foskey had. I'm talking like 17 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, 2 picks. It's going to have to be something like that.
Yeah.
For him to be an All-American because a lot of this too is about what's your reputation coming in.
100%.
And because we see guys you're like, dude, why'd that guy make an All-American list? The only guys that don't are the guys that didn't have a name, or the guys that put up huge numbers.
Right.
And so that's kind of why. That's how I look at it. So yeah, Patelho would to me as an All-American would have the biggest impact on this team. I hope it's all 3, but
that'd be great. But
Patelho for me.
And you said it. I don't see Merriweather having the stats because it's going to be super stat driven.
He could. Yeah, he could.
That's not good news for the offense, right? I mean, in my opinion, that's.
Look, if Tobias comes out there and he's just unguardable, he's Justin Jefferson, and you just can't guard him, and he's just killing people. I don't think that's bad for the offense. It just to me, his numbers would have to be so insane that to be an All-American that it would be like, okay, right, the offense is pretty good, but if Patelho's also not
right,
you're gonna get outscored, and that's my concern, if that makes sense. But I guess it would be depend on why he put up those numbers, Vince. Is it because he was just that good, or was it because like what Golden Tate dealt with in 2009, where it was partly he's really good, but it's also partly like who else you gonna throw the ball to?
Else to throw the ball to.
Rudolph was banged up.
That's more along the lines.
Was out.
Yeah. That's more along the lines that I was coming at it from. Is like if he's your only go-to guy and he racks up the numbers that he does.
Yeah.
I worry about what the rest of the offense looks like.
Right.
But if it's your scenario where he's just unguardable and you're like, yeah, I'm just going to go right. Hey, I'm going to 15 and it doesn't matter. Like, that'd be great. Like, that would be awesome. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Nathan Urbach wants to know, Brian, how much do I need to super chat for you to drop the name of the defensive lineman you won't say? Give me
$1,000. And it better not be a super chat because then I lose 35% of it. But if you want to donate $1,000 to me, I'll tell you who it is. There you go. So
well done. Jay Henry, if you were,
because he asked me, texted me during the show. He said everyone has their price. I said, okay, $1,000. When that check is in the mail, when I get that check, I'll let you know. And the check clears the bank.
Yeah, so they make sure it doesn't bounce first.
I'm no fool.
Yeah. Jay Henry says, if you were Georgia, where you have a ton of quarterbacks for next year, what would you do? Let the current group compete or hit the portal?
I mean, it just depends on. It's one thing to have a ton of quarterbacks. It's another thing. Do you have guys that you think you can win a championship with?
Right.
Personally, for me, with what I know of in the portal, I'd go with the kids I have. If they have a ton. I know they have the Vandergrift kid from a couple years ago. Beck, the Carson Beck kid, who's their backup, I believe now. I'd go with those guys and give them. I mean, look, you just won a championship and you're playing for another with Stetson Bennett, a quarterback. You don't need. You don't need to go get the next Bryce Young, right? It's not who you are.
Agreed.
Stetson Bennett's going to win more championships in his career than Bryce Young and CJ Stroud combined. I mean, at Georgia, you don't need that. You don't need that, in my opinion.
Chris Irway, regarding Viper, it's still another year away, but do you think the staff looks at Keanu Kia once he gets back from his mission as a guy to provide value?
Yeah, he was more of a Mike when he was there, and somebody else asked about that. So Keanu was at Notre Dame in 2021. I believe missions are 2 years usually, right?
Yeah, last time I
checked.
So
he wouldn't be coming back till 2024. So I don't think he doesn't factor into things this year.
Yeah, so he said it's still a year away. He agreed.
But somebody else asked.
Oh, gotcha.
So just want to make sure that we're clear of that. But I think he's more of a Mike. To me, it lasts right now. I mean, I don't know what he's going to look like when he comes back.
And that's a good
because some people think that these missions are like you just go to these like remote jungle of some place. Sometimes it's in Salt Lake City. I mean, it's not. It's in Chicago. It's in Atlanta. It's what I mean. Like it's not always like in this this third world country or something like that. Sometimes it is, but not always. Right. So
you have opportunities to stay healthy and not healthy, but continue to work on your body and stay where you need to be. So, all right. Sean Higgins, we haven't heard much about Tyson Ford's development. What's the word, Hummingbird?
He was banged up a lot this year, so it was hard for him to really have steady growth throughout the year, but he's flashed potential. He's just got to go out and do it. That's the big thing. So he's got to go out and do it.
Yeah. Broke neck boy. Which schools have the best history with each specific position? Oh, remember that?
We told him to come back. We told him to come back. So, I'm having a tough time with some of these. So, running back, I think that's an easy one. That's USC. I mean, it's hard for anybody to compete with what USC has done at running back.
And you're talking
tight end, it's Notre Dame.
All time. You're talking
of what I know of my lifetime. Yeah. But I'm also aware. I didn't see him play, but I'm aware of USC's tradition at running back. It's just hard to match that at running back. Tight end, Notre Dame, in my view. Again, because going back before my lifetime, I can still be aware of Dave Casper and and all those kind of guys, Ken McAfee and all those guys. And obviously the last 15 years, it's been outstanding production at tight end. Defensive line, Vince, that's an secondary DB. I mean, I'd probably go to Miami. It's probably where I would go. Just some of the stuff they've done in the secondary is pretty good. Linebacker, that's an interesting one. A lot of people say Penn State, right? Like, isn't that one a lot of people say? Penn State's
linebacker U for like in the 90s, in the early. I feel like that was the 90s, early 2000s.
And then like LeVar Arrington and that kind of thing. So, Penn State's in that conversation. Ohio State's in that conversation. I've heard people say USC. I wouldn't go with USC. I'd probably go Penn State or Miami. For me, I mean, Miami, Ray Lewis, Jonathan Vilma, just kind of going through over the years of some of the linebackers they've produced has just been really good. Ohio State had a stretch in there where they were as good as anybody producing linebackers. I mean, from Andy Katzenmoyer was a first-round pick, and then you had that stretch where, like, you had A.J. Hawk and Bobby Carpenter and James Laurinaitis and Marcus Freeman and Anthony Schlegel and, those kind of guys. But it was more short-lived. not like over a long period of time for me. I just wish Notre Dame could start producing more consistency at linebacker because nobody's produced more Butkus Award winners the last 11 years than Notre Dame.
Yeah.
It's just there's always been a drop off from then. I'm trying to think. Vince, do you have any thoughts on kind of who it would be for defensive line? I mean, I want to kind of go. I've heard to me, it's Florida State for me. Just because you think of like, especially like in the 90s, man, they were putting out first round draft picks. Like you never heard of Andre Wadsworth, and all of a sudden he steps into the starting lineup after replacing the dudes they had before, and all of a sudden he's a first round pick, and then after that's another first round pick. I'd probably go out Florida State for me. Would be mine.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's
a good one.
Yeah. So wide receiver, that's an interesting one, Vince. Man, that's that one. Yeah. I mean, recently it's Ohio State. I mean, recently it's Ohio State. Over the history of college football, that's a little tougher, man. That's a little tougher one.
It's so spread out is the thing. Like there's just different pockets where you've had a good chunk of wide receivers. But I mean, like you said, recently it's Ohio State, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, wide receiver is also more of a recent position, right? Because, you didn't have three wides and all of that.
Yeah, they were different
25 plus years ago. You know what I mean? So it's just a different kind of a scenario when it comes to wide receiver.
Yeah. Wide receiver, man, that's a really tough one. It's a really tough one. It's a really tough one. I'd have to think about that. That one I have a hard time. I mean, part of me wants to go to USC just, again, but I don't want to cheat. That's partly because of my familiarity with it, but I'd have to really think about it. Last decade, it's Ohio State. I mean, even like not even just the recent run, but remember Michael Thomas was on the 2014 title team.
Right.
He wasn't even the leading receiver. He went on to like break the NFL record for catches. Like who are the two leading receivers in yards in the NFL this year? It's Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. Shocker.
Right.
What I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's definitely been Ohio State recently. Yeah.
So what have we done? Quarterbacks?
Quarterback,
USC.
I mean, it's kind of hard to.
They got an awful lot of Heisman Trophy winners.
Yeah, it really is.
I hate it. I don't like it, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to go against them. It really is. We've had Oklahoma recently has been pretty good, but USC over the history of time. I mean, even go all the way back to Pat Hayden, I mean, that'd have to be them. I'm curious, I'm curious kind of what other people think about this. Cause we did running back, we did receivers, did tight end, O-line over history. That's a little different than, last decade,
it's Notre Dame, but over the whole enchilada of it, I don't know.
Oh, Wisconsin's been pretty good recently. That's a really good one. That's a really tough one. That's a really interesting one. Because Alabama's produced a lot of first round picks. I think a lot of those guys were overdrafted and overhyped.
Yeah, right.
DJ Fluker was overhyped. James Carpenter was overhyped. They were better as individual, like as a unit than they were individual players, in my opinion. I'd have to think about that one, Vince. I have to think about that one. That's the only one because again, it's also like. I mean, Nebraska always had great lines. My whole life, they had great lines. But I couldn't tell you a lot of guys from Nebraska that ended up going on to be high NFL draft picks. I know there were some, but I couldn't think of any. But I'd probably say Nebraska. They've slipped off lately, but in my history, Nebraska is the one that stands out to me. So D-line we said Florida State. Linebacker I went with Miami. DBU, what do we go with again on that one? We go with Miami on that one too.
We went with Miami, yeah.
Yeah, because they just had so many just crazy runs in the 80s and 90s, man. It was just nuts. Absolutely nuts. Florida State's produced a ton of good DBs over the years, too. I mean, there's Dion, but Corey Bush and they had so many corners over the years, man. But even Miami, they had the great runs in the 80s and 90s, but then there's Sean Taylor that came up later and Ed Reed and Philip Buchanan. I mean, they had a secondary that one year. It was an 0-1 where like literally every dude on that in the secondary was like a first or second round draft pick. It was just nuts. So I'd have to go with Miami on that one. But I give Notre Dame tight end U. That's one I give Notre Dame to. There was a time where Notre Dame could have been in the conversation for D-line U back in the day when you think of like Ross Browner and Alan Page and all those guys. But it's been a long time since.
I was going to say it's been a minute.
Yeah, I mean, real long time.
The best defensive lineman in recent history is what, Bryant Young? He's retired in the Hall of Fame.
As far as like that kind of guy, like Foskey was just not that kind of guy. Tuitt had one good year. Tillery had one good half a year.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time. Last defensive end to be drafted in the first round was Burt Berry. Actually, no, Ronaldo Wynn.
Ronaldo Wynn.
Yeah. Yep. Somebody said that because my comment about Michigan that I want Denver, Harbaugh in Denver, I could not care less about Jim Harbaugh going to Denver. I would not like it, but I don't care who they hire. I mean, honestly, I just don't watch the NFL anymore. I haven't really been a Broncos fan in a couple of years now, and the moves they made this offseason were the final straw for me, Vince. It's just like it was just really bad.
Yeah,
it was really bad. I know we got a super chat down there as well.
Do we? Okay, let me go down and grab it here from Patrick. He says, thank you for the super chat, Patrick. After Iowa and IU last night, officials show that they aren't just grossly bad in only football, waving off a tech for Iowa's coach after crossing mid-court. Yeah. First of all, if you're going to give out a tech, you can't take it back. Like, oops.
Yeah. Did you see that, Vince? I didn't see it.
No, I didn't see it, but I'm just saying, based on this description, if you call it, stand by it, man. Like, I guess I have an issue with that.
Yeah. I would just need to know the circumstances because, maybe guy yelled a word that you thought he was saying to you and you see him a T, and then he's like, no, that's a play that we run, and he could show that,
right.
Like, okay, that's my bad. Rescind it, I guess, but I'd have to know the context. But my gut is to say the same thing you did, Vince, which is.
But I didn't see it. So you're right. I don't have all the details.
But just off what he said, I would.
Right.
I mean, crossing mid-court, that's some context. Like, that's.
Right.
It's a bit of a problem.
Right.
Yeah. And I would assume that he was warned.
I would assume that would be the case as well.
Yeah.
All right. A couple super chats here to roll through from Tyler. Thank you very much, Tyler. I'm a Carolina Panthers fan, and I do not want Harbaugh. He can go to the Denver Broncos, please. Okay. I mean, I am not a fan of Jim Harbaugh, obviously, because he's a Michigan guy, but he's got a pretty good track record in the NFL.
And college.
I mean,
look, we can dislike Jim Harbaugh all we want, and I get it. And he's a weird dude. He's a weird dude. Really freaking weird guy.
Yep.
And he's always been kind of weird, and he's gotten weirder as he's gone on. But here's what Jim Harbaugh has done as a college football coach. He took over at San Diego in FCS and went 7-4, 11-1, and 11-1. He took over a terrible Stanford team and went 4-8 his first year. And by his fourth year, they were 12-1 and Orange Bowl champs. And then he laid the foundation for what David Shaw did. At Michigan, he's gone 10-3, 10-3, 8-5, 10-3, 9-4, COVID year, 12-2, 13-1. And he's had in 8 years, has had 2 top 10 finishes. He's about to have a third top 10 finish.
Oh, yeah.
Another year where they finished 11th, another year where they finished 14th, another year where they finished 18th. And he's now done 2 years in a row what no Ohio State coach has been able to do in 20 years, which is Michigan coach has been able to do in 20 years, which is beat Ohio State back-to-back years. So, and then the NFL, he was there 4 years. He went to the NFC Championship 3 years in a row and went to a Super Bowl.
Yep.
And
lost to his brother.
And got fired after going 8-8. That's the year they got him fired, an 8-8 year. So you can hate him all you want or think he's weird and quirky, and he is that, but the guy's been successful everywhere he's gone. Yeah. Now, if you'd asked me this 2 years ago, my conversation might have been a little different. They're coming off the 2-4 year. They'd gone 9-4 the year before that. The COVID year was a dumpster fire, but he's turned it all around, and they've done what they've done. Now, here's the black eye on Harbaugh. He is 1-6 in the postseason in bowl games at Michigan. They won their first year against.
It was the first year because he's 0-6.
Yep. And since then, they lost in the Orange Bowl. They lost in the Outback Bowl, the Peach Bowl. Let's see here. The Citrus Bowl, which they won before. And then, of course, the last 2 years in the playoff, they've lost. But yeah, they lost in the Orange Bowl to Florida State, if you remember that. They lost to South Carolina in the Outback Bowl. That's that game where Jadeveon Clowney had that sick hit on the Michigan guy. They got blown out by Florida in 2008 in the Peach Bowl, and then they got blown out by Alabama, which honestly, that one I don't hold against them. That Alabama team was way better than they were. That was such a bad matchup. Like, that was not a very good Michigan team. And then that team had to go play Alabama. That just was a Tua Tagovailoa injury away from maybe being in the playoffs that year again. I mean, that was unfair. But they got blown out by Ohio State that year, got blown up by Wisconsin that year. That wasn't a very good Michigan team. But, yeah, he just hasn't been able to win in the postseason. That's the reality. That's the black mark. But he's getting them to those big games. Right? So he's a good football coach. Would I want him at Denver? No. But I don't care. I don't watch the NFL. I watched the Broncos game in 2 years. I'll watch the championship games and the Super Bowl. That's all I watch of the NFL. So sorry.
All right, Trevor has a couple in a row here. So thank you,
3
Trevor.
in a row actually.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Happy Friday, IB Nation. All right, guys, putting you on the spot with center and tackle kind of locked up. Not kind of locked. They are locked up. Center and tackle are locked up. Who are the starting guards next season and a sleeper on the O-line next year to look out for?
Well, if we're doing our job, there is no sleepers because you know about all of them.
Exactly.
If I had to predict right now, based on who we know, I'd go with Andrew Kristofic and Billy Schrauth as the starting guards.
Yep.
Billy at probably right and Andrew at left would be what I would assume. That's what I would assume. Now, if Rocco Spindler has a great offseason, he might be in the mix. Ty Chan's a guy that I'd keep an eye out on going into next year if he can have a good offseason as one of the young guys. Maybe Michael Carmody gets a chance to move inside and have an opportunity to battle there. Those are guys that I would consider. And then, if the right guy hits the portal, I think they would at least consider that. I don't think it's necessarily something they're actively seeking, but just more of like is there a way for us to be better? And I think that's kind of what you kind of get down to on that one. So I would Vince, you have any? I mean, would you say anything different?
Well, I said earlier that the two guys I would have are the two guys that you just said. Like that, as of right now, that's who I would plug in. Now, obviously, things can change, and then as far as a sleeper to look out for, that's hard to say. Rocco, I think, would qualify, but is he a sleeper because everybody talks about him all the time?
Mm-hmm.
Is he a sleeper? He's a sleeper from a production standpoint. I think he'd be a sleeper, right? Because I don't think people in the know are counting on him to be the starter. So I think he would be a sleeper, right? Maybe Pat Coogan could be like a sleeper in this regard, right? Those would be the only two I think I could come up with legitimate chance to be a sleeper at guard. But yeah, my two starters right now would be Billy and Kristofic.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Somebody had an interesting comment about Purdue and about QBU. Joe Medina.
I saw that. I saw
Purdue's
that.
Very underrated quarterback. They've given the league Bob Greasy, Lynn Dawson, and Drew Brees. So when I first read that, I was like, QBU. I mean, that's just recently. They had Drew Brees and then Kyle Orton. But he's right. Like Lynn Dawson, Super Bowl champ. Bob Greasy, Super Bowl champ. The issue that I would have, and there's been some other guys. I'm trying to think of. There was another quarterback they had, I think in the 80s, that was pretty good too. And didn't Jeff George start off at Purdue?
Oh, did he really?
I thought Jeff George started off at Purdue and then transferred to Illinois. I could be wrong on that, but I'm looking at Purdue now, and actually I'm going to go by position and go to quarterback. I feel like there was another guy that Purdue had. Curtis Painter got drafted in the 6th round. See, Kyle Orton was a 4th round pick. Obviously, Drew Brees, Jim Everett from the Rams. Remember him? He was at Purdue. That's not who I was thinking of though. But that's one. Mark Herman was from Purdue. I'm trying to think. Maybe he did. Maybe it wasn't from Purdue. Mike Phipps, but that was in the 70s. That's who I was thinking of. So that was in the 60s and 60s. And then Bob Greasy. So and then Lynn Dawson. So I mean, Purdue, as I'm looking at it here, Vince, Purdue has had
a case.
Yeah, Purdue has had Drew Brees was the first pick of the 2nd round. Then Jim Everett was the number 3 overall pick in the 1st round. You had, I believe, Bob, if I just saw, Mike Phipps was a first-round draft pick. He was the number 3 overall pick. Bob Greasy was a first-round draft pick, the number 4 overall pick. And Lynn Dawson was a first-round draft pick, the number 5 overall pick.
Well,
so I kind of at first scoffed at this. And then I was like, no, hold on a second. Like, because you think about Bob Greasy, but then you think about Lynn Dawson, who passed away recently. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer that won a Super Bowl, played in 2, I think won 1, right?
So are we talking about NFL?
No, but
success?
They were great. They were great college players because they were
right.
Is what I'm saying.
No. No, that's a good point. Okay, because they've got 3 Hall of Famers. I mean,
right,
but
my point is, all those Hall of Famers were high draft picks,
right?
And they're not high draft picks if they weren't really good. And
sure.
Purdue was really good when Bob Greasy was there,
right?
So they weren't bums in college, because like what I wouldn't do is like look at Michigan and give them credit for being QBU because they produced Tom Brady, because y'all didn't even want him to start. You guys kept wanting Drew Henson to start over him. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So I'm not giving you credit for that one. But these guys were like top 10 NFL draft. Jim Everett was number 3 overall pick. Bob Greasy was a number 4 overall pick, right? Mike Phipps was number 3 overall pick. Notre Dame hasn't produced that many top 5 draft picks at quarterback. Have they ever produced any? I mean, I'd be curious about that. If Notre Dame's ever produced what's the high? Okay, so George Izzo in 1960 was the number 2 overall pick. Let's see. Bob Williams in 1951 was the number. So, I mean, you got to go back a long time, and this is back when quarterback was a little bit different. So yeah, the 40s. Angelo Bertelli was number 1 in 1944, right? So you got to go back a long time to see when Notre Dame was putting out that kind of production that Purdue has had since then. So yeah, Brady Quinn was the number 1 draft pick. Before Brady Quinn, there was Rick Meyer, number 2 overall. And then after that, Berlin was 4th round. Blair Kill was 11th round. Rusty Lish was 4th round. Joe Montana was 3rd round. Joe Theismann was 4th round. Terry Hanratty was 2nd round. So Notre Dame's produced some big time. Bob Belden was drafted. That's my guy. I know Bob. Really good guy. John Hewitt was 2nd round. 6th round, excuse me. Daryl LaMonica was 12th round. Notre Dame's produced some good quarterbacks, but it's just they've gone 30 years and produced not much.
Right.
Jimmy was 2nd round, right? Jimmy Clausen was 2nd round. Deshaun was 2nd round. So yeah, I can't put Notre Dame in there. But yeah, Purdue's a really interesting one because hold on a second. Let me look this up, Vince, because I think Purdue had won a. Didn't Purdue win a national championship at one point in time? Hold on a second. No, they did not. They won the Big Ten, though. Their claim to national championship was 1931. So, yeah. I was just curious about that. But anyway, we can continue. But I thought that was a very interesting take on that one that I would not have thought of. They would not have been in my initial thought process. So, good one. Good one, Joe.
Trevor with another super chat. Is there a legit 300-pound plus defensive tackle in the portal that Notre Dame could desperately use? Also, is Anthony Lucas a guy Notre Dame would be interested in again?
Yeah, we talked about that. Notre Dame would love to have Anthony Lucas again, but I just don't think it's going to happen as of right now. Things would have to change and go in a different direction for Notre Dame to get him, but they're trying. They're definitely trying.
Yeah.
300-plus pound guy, not that I'm aware of, that would have interest in Notre Dame. I mean, because here's the thing. If that guy exists in the portal, everybody wants him.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's going to be NIL deals thrown at him. And, and then he's going to be looking at who's producing high draft picks. And that's the thing that's going to hurt that kind of kid is, and if he's draft eligible, he's that good, he's going to be going pro anyway. And they tried to get one of those guys, and he transferred to Florida State instead of Notre Dame. And even though he's from an hour down the street, what's Michigan City, Vince? Like an hour, 45 minutes?
45 minutes.
They couldn't get him. It's a problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem, especially how much he grew up loving Notre Dame. Yeah. So, Steve Rolfe with the super chat. Thanks, Steve. He says, love the T-shirt I just got from the Irish Breakdown store.
Nice. Very nice.
I wear mine all the time. I've got one on underneath this one. Look at that. Oh, I got Irish Breakdown I'm layered up, baby. I love my T-shirts. They're super comfortable.
Yep.
Super comfortable. And we got another one here from Trevor. What kind of role do you see Tyson Ford having?
Well, that's going to have to be determined in the offseason, Trevor. I mean, not to be dismissive of your question, but like right now, he was banged up a lot this year. So he's not in that conversation just yet. He's going to start basically from the bottom, and he's going to have to work his way up. But I'll say this, I've talked to some different sources, and when the light goes on for him, he's good. He shows that potential. He's young and raw. And so this is going to be a very important offseason for Tyson Ford. Very important offseason for Tyson Ford. And he's one of those guys that if the light can go on for Tyson in the weight room this winter, and then on the football field in the spring, Vince, we could have some really, really interesting conversations about what the defensive line is going to look like this year. Yeah. He could be one of those key guys, in my opinion. Him and Jason Onye are two guys that I'm just like, man, I hope the light goes on this offseason. Man, I hope the light goes off this offseason, because if those two kids can bust out,
that's going to make this D-line a heck of a lot better, man.
Yeah,
a heck
it
of
really
a lot
could.
Better.
Absolutely, Vince. Absolutely.
Irish Gordian Knot. Brian and Vince, what do you think about Henderson coming down as a gadget viper? Anything to get him more chances to get to the quarter? He can't be on the line of scrimmage. He's not big enough.
I'm okay bringing him on an occasional blitz, but I want him playing in the alleys.
Yes.
That's where 100%. I want him playing.
Yeah. 100%. He is nowhere. He will get eaten alive if he starts off on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
Just
well, he said kind of gadget viper. So, I mean, I would imagine he's kind of thinking moving him around a little bit, that kind of thing. But still
I don't. Yeah. Same guy. Emil Wagner is so athletic. How would you feel about the staff carving out plays where he's a tight end H-back?
In the goal line, I'd have no problem with that whatsoever. None.
Short yardage.
Yeah. If you want to get down to the goal line and say it's second and goal, first and goal, and you're just going to say, hey, we're the biggest, baddest dudes here, and you're not stopping us, and you want to put him in as an extra edge guy, Vince, I don't know about you, but I'd have no problem with that. None.
No,
I just wouldn't want to make that like something I'm doing all the time. But yeah, I'd have no problem with that. No problem with that. Because honestly, Emil's the kind of athlete where you could maybe in the game sneak him out and throw him the football. You know what I mean? Like, pretty athletic kid. Yeah. And if that's something that gets him some touches, cool. Go for it. I mean, not some touches, but some snaps and some opportunities.
Yeah, right.
Cool.
Yeah.
I don't care about getting him touches. I just thought that'd be fun. But
well, and here's the thing. Yeah. So he still has so much weight he could put on his frame. Like,
needs to.
Josh Lugg put out a picture on his Twitter today of all of the offensive linemen, and they're all. It was after the Gator Bowl. They're all standing there. Emil Wagner looks skinny. Yeah, I don't know how else to put it.
Well, I've seen some film of practice from this year, and he's noticeably thin.
Yes.
Like, noticeably thin.
Do you see the picture that I'm talking about? Yeah, he just looks a lot thinner than
he looks like a tight end standing around with a bunch of offensive linemen.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. So, in order for him to be a starting offensive lineman, he's going to have to put a lot of weight on. But in this regard, I have no problem with it whatsoever, what you're talking about.
Because what it does, so Emil has tremendous upside.
Right.
Like, he's long. He's got bricks for hands, Vince. Like, big cement, A-grade cement hands.
Right.
He's long. He's athletic. I've heard he's really smart, which is always important for an offensive lineman. He's just light, and he's raw technique-wise. The technique part, I'm not worried about. That'll come. If you're a hard worker and you listen to Harry, that'll come. But you can't be 275 and be a starting offensive tackle in college football these days. And it used to be a big guy, but now it's just like you can't be that guy.
Right.
So this kind of role, Vince, to your point, would give him a chance to get in the game where he's going to be blocking a little bit smaller players.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the play after play grind, but it gives him some experience for when the time finally comes that he has added the weight and he's ready to compete. You're not putting a kid that now he hasn't going to be asked to do what he would do as a starter, but at least he's been in the bright lights of a game and he's got a job to do in order to get a touchdown. It's a pretty important job.
Right.
That's another reason I think it would work real well is because you're going to get him some much needed experience. I would do the same thing if Billy Schrouth wasn't a starter.
Right.
Like, let's just say hypothetically they get a grad transfer and he starts at right guard and Andrew Kristofic wins the left guard job and Billy's that number 3 guy. I would find every way possible to get Billy Schrouth on the field. As a rotation and short yardage, goal line, whatever. And Emil, I feel very similarly about.
Siggy 13, after a decade or two in a 12-team playoff, do you see more undefeated or one-loss teams winning it all, or 2 to 3 loss teams winning it all? I put a poll on the board, but I wanted your guys' opinion.
You want to start?
Yeah,
Vince?
I'll start it off. I think you're going to see more undefeated or one-loss teams winning it all because they're better teams. I mean, they're more complete. You will see the occasional 2 to 3 loss team win it, the occasional. But the question is, do you see more? I mean, just the basis of the question, undefeated or one-loss teams are generally better than 2 or 3 loss teams. Now, you can get hot at the right time, and that it's just like the NCAA tournament for basketball. You can get hot and you can make a run. I have no problem with that. But I think if you're looking at a 10 to 20-year period, there's going to be more undefeated or one-loss teams winning than there will be 2 to 3 loss teams winning.
To me, it depends. And I think you're going to agree with me on this, Vince. It depends on what the criteria is for making the 12-team playoff. Okay. What I would love is if the committee started putting more emphasis on things like schedule and were you really challenged and say, hey, we're going to take this 10-2 team that played 5 ranked opponents over this 11-1 team that played nobody, or even this 12-0 team that played nobody. Right, that wasn't that maybe loses in the conference championship game. Right, I'm going to take this team over here that played really brutal out of conference schedule and all. Like Clemson this year would get a big boost for me in this scenario because they scheduled Notre Dame and South Carolina out of conference. Like I want to see that. And, so that if let's just say there was no automatic bids and I had to come down to an undefeated Michigan team that had like 2 good games all year and a team just trying to think of a team that played like Notre Dame's 1988 schedule and lost 2 games.
Yeah.
Give me that team over that team. If the if the committee, because the NCAA doesn't have anything to do with the playoff and the championship game in college football, if the committee was willing to really make its criteria such that, hey, here's what we care about. We care about teams that prove over the course of an entire season and against quality scheduling that they're that good. If they would do that, then what you would see now is some of those teams that maybe like USC 2016 that weren't good in September because there was an injury or they were a young team, but by the end of the year, Vince, like you said, they're really hot. Then what you're going to end up finding is more teams like that are going to make runs and knock somebody off. And then that sets up opportunities for other teams to kind of get into that. So, but that's not happening if right now, my fear is that they're just going to continue to overhype teams based on their win-loss record and not who you played. And especially with the SEC constantly getting overhyped about how good of a league it is. And there's no incentive for the SEC to play well out of conference. Then all of a sudden you start seeing these 12-1, 11-1, 12-0 teams that just don't play anybody. And those teams are getting in. And it's just that nonsense over and over, to your point. But if you start rewarding teams that play tough, then more and more teams are going to have to say, hey, we have to schedule tougher out of conference, which means there's a chance, Vince, a greatly increased chance that some really good teams have a couple losses on their schedule early on, and then late in the year, they get hot and they're ready to go. You know what I mean? Because here's what I don't like. I'll use Notre Dame as an example. Give me a 2016 3-loss USC team in the playoff over a Notre Dame 2021 1-loss team in the playoff. Because that 2021 Notre Dame team beat nobody. Nobody. That 9-3 USC team from 2016 beat top 5 Washington on the road by 2 touchdowns. They had a really bad start to the season, but by the end of the year, they could have played with anybody. You get my example, Vince? So
I do. I just don't think that's going to be the debate.
It would require the committee to. That's why I said it would require the committee to change the criteria for that.
Yeah.
But under the current way that they pick teams for the playoff, Vince, there's no incentive to schedule tough out of conference.
Agreed.
The only teams that there's incentive that this is what makes it so screwed up. The only incentive to schedule tough is the lesser known teams. Like Big 12 teams have to. Right. Because the Pac-12 teams and the Big 12 teams have to schedule tougher out of conference games because they don't get the benefit of the doubt.
Like the SEC does.
Right.
And the Big Ten for that matter.
Yeah. So they have to schedule. Which increases the odds that they lose a couple games.
Sure.
Which is unfair. But that's the way that it is. So to your point on this current criteria, Vince, I agree with you. but I think there hopefully becomes a push at some point in time. And that's the one thing that could come out of the super conferences, Vince, is that maybe some of these teams are forced to play a little bit tougher because they have to because of whatever. But right now, like how Michigan can get in with that soft schedule, that weak,
and they'll get in every time. They'll get in every time.
Yeah, and so I want until the committee changes that. That's just the reality of it. And yes, I do hate the SEC.
Can't believe
I've never hidden that fact.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why somebody's surprised in this chat that I hate the SEC.
If ND is committed to Al Golden, does he really have 3-3-5 in his system?
Absolutely. He ran a 3-4 defense back in the day. He knows how to run a 3-down look.
Right.
I just think one of the good things I think Al Golden did this year, Vince, is he coached his personnel.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I think he did a good job of. He didn't have 3-3-5 personnel this year. He had 4-down personnel with Isaiah Foskey. And so I think he coached that. So, yeah.
All right. Next up on the list is Ty C. Out of the players currently on the roster, who are your picks for captains?
Oh, boy. I mean, you got to think Sam Hartman's going to be in that conversation because he's been a multi-year captain. Offensively, Vince, I think Zeke Correll's the guy that I'm keeping my eye out on, that I could see kind of stepping into that role. Defensively, I think J.D. Bertrand, obviously.
Yes.
Cam Hart will have a shot to step into that role. Potentially Riley Mills, but he's got to step up and play a little bit better. Because usually it's going to be juniors and seniors, so like you're not going to see like Benjamin Morrison and guys like that. Tight end, I don't know if I see anybody there. I said Zeke on the offensive line, but it wouldn't shock me if like Blake or Joe kind of has a great offseason of leadership and they become one of those guys. Defensive line-wise, Vince, Howard Cross could potentially – I don't know how talkative he is, but maybe from a leadership standpoint, maybe him or Riley, maybe. J.D. Bertrand and Jack Kaiser at linebacker, secondary-wise, Cam Hart. I can't think of anybody else in the secondary that I consider a captain type of guy, Vince.
The only person I would consider, but I think he still needs another year, would be Xavier Watts.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I still think he's a year away. I don't think it'll be for this year. So that would be the only. I wouldn't really consider any of the running backs. I just don't. They don't. I just wouldn't.
I think in 2024
that's different.
It wouldn't shock me if like Audric Esme steps into a captain role.
Absolutely, but not next year. Not in 23. Because you got to also people have to remember juniors as captains. That's not really a thing. Yes, it was for Michael Mayer.
They've had it's more reward for a great player.
Yeah.
Kyle Hamilton in 2021,
right.
Michael Mayer this year.
Because
Michael Mayer earned his more.
Agreed. Right. But they also knew Michael Mayer and Kyle Hamilton were leaving after their junior year. So, I mean, that's
Michael Mayer's was more deserved, in my opinion, than Kyle Hamilton.
I completely agree with that. I completely agree with that. So, yeah, I would throw a lot of the juniors out of the mix just because of that, except for maybe a Joe Alt, because I think he could be a 3-year player.
Or Blake. I could see now. See, I know that Joe is the better player right now, but I could see Blake stepping into more of a leadership role because he's a vocal kid. He does a lot in the community. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of captain traits I see in Blake. He just has to continue maturing because he's a sophomore, like every other sophomore does. Right?
Exactly.
Joe strikes me as more of a quiet type of guy. Where Blake could kind of become a captain in the similar way that Q was, and Joe could become a captain in a similar way that McGlinchey was.
Yeah.
I could see something like that. But I wouldn't discount Blake either because he's got a little bit of this to him. Like, he's not afraid to talk and speak his mind. It's just you just want a guy that's got a little bit more seasoning on what to say and how to say it and when to say it, which just comes through experience.
Yeah.
But I think Blake's a kid that I would be curious to see if he can have the necessary growth as a young man and a player to become that, because he's got some because he works hard. From everything I've ever heard about Blake, from the way he works hard. He's not just some big kid who gets by on being talented. You got to kick him in the pants all the time.
Right.
Yeah, I've never heard that about him. He'd be an interesting one, Vince. Because Joe Alt makes sense. I'm not Joe Alt.
No, right,
sure.
right. No, I'm not.
I'm just saying along with Joe Alt, I could easily see Blake Fisher maybe step into that kind of role as well.
I think this could happen too. Michael Vincent, he's coming back for what?
10th
year. I mean, he's been here for a long time.
And I'm a big believer in special teams captains.
Me too.
I think you can't tell me as a coach that special teams is this really important thing but then not have a guy who's a captain who only plays special teams.
Yeah.
That's a great point. It's a great
I
point.
love
Who
that
had
one.
that one? Who had that one?
It's at the very, very
Back
bottom.
up. Yes.
Back up.
Yeah. That's a great call.
Yeah.
Great call on Michael Vincent. Absolutely. Because he's got all the leadership. It's not that he's just good at what he does. He's got a lot of leadership characteristics that you look for in a guy. Absolutely. Right. That's a good one. Because that's why Bo Bauer was the captain this year. It wasn't because of his linebacker
Absolutely.
play. It's because he's a special teams guy. And that's good. That should be the case. You should always have the NFL usually does that, right, Vince? Don't they kind of have on that one?
It's usually one from each, offense, defense, special teams. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Ty C, out of the players currently on the roster. Oh, I already read that one. Let's get rid of that one. There we go. How about this one from Katie? When do you expect the starting QB to be named, and how will that affect reps for Hartman and Buckner?
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I think they're going to have a pretty good idea by the end of the spring. Just my opinion. If Notre Dame is the staff that I think that they are, and we've seen examples of this already with how they handled Drew Pine, I give them credit. It would have been very easy for Coach Reese and Coach Freeman to decide, you know what, let's not say anything to Drew right now. Let's get through this portal window and all that kind of stuff, and then but they went to him right away and said, hey, we're going to bring a transfer kid, and Tyler's probably going to start the bowl game.
Yeah.
Now, they hoped that he would stay, but they knew that they're not stupid and naive. They didn't.
Right.
They weren't like, oh my God, Drew's transferring. Like, we don't have any clue why. They didn't like how he went about it by not.
Sure.
But they still love Drew and respect Drew, and that's why they wanted to tell him up front. They thought he deserved to be told up front, and then he can make whatever. And they knew that him potentially leaving was an option.
Right.
I think that they'd hoped he would stay for the game, and I think they'll do the same thing to Tyler, and say, we don't want you to leave, but Sam's the guy right now, right? Like, we're going to fall camp, and if you continue growing, you may be the guy, but Sam's the guy right now. If that's the truth,
right.
Now, if it's close, then don't name a guy,
right?
But if Sam's clearly the guy, then I would say, Tyler, here's the deal. Sam's going to start right now and go into fall camp as a starter, but here's what we need you to do, man. You are still a big part of our present and our future. Here's the role we have for you this year. We're going to continue to develop you as a quarterback, and our hope is that you're a 2-year starter after that. But also be honest with him then. So if he does decide to leave, he can leave then and not later. And then Notre Dame can then go into the portal to find a backup. So I think that's what they would do, Vince.
I think I would be surprised if they named someone after spring practice. It's possible, and it would not, like, if I'm the coach and it's clear and obvious that is who our starter is going to be, then you do it. You go ahead and you name him going into the offseason. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I would be surprised if it happened that quickly. That's just me.
I wouldn't.
Okay.
Because I just think that Sam Hartman's just going to be so steady and so consistent. And I mean, again,
you want to build your offense around.
Yeah.
I get that.
I think Tyler would have to just be nasty.
Yeah.
In spring, which could happen. And I mean, maybe that's where you're coming from, Vince, is you just expect Tyler to take the bowl game experience.
I expect him to
jump.
Battle. I really do. I expect there to be a battle here. So I guess
I wouldn't be
surprised.
I wouldn't be upset if you're right.
Right.
Because that means
I guess
Tyler.
Surprised isn't the right word.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That I would be surprised if they announced it after spring. But I think it goes into fall. But we'll see. Yeah. I mean, again, if he's your guy, then you go for it. Right. Like, name your guy. Like, I have no problem with that at all. So, either way, whoever it happens to be. Sparkling Swan, if you had to throw money on it, would you bet a title in 23 or 24 for Notre Dame?
I mean, I wouldn't bet much money on it because 2 reasons. Number 1 is I don't bet. And number 2 is I think Notre Dame has an opportunity both years to compete for a title, but we're talking about a team that hasn't won a title in over 30 years. They got to show it to me first. They got to prove it to me first, because just because you have the roster to win a title doesn't mean you're going to. Alabama had a roster to win a title this year and win it. They weren't even in the playoff. Why? Because they didn't have a title team.
Yeah.
They had the talent to do so. Notre Dame has not shown me that they can put a championship program on the field and on the sidelines. And they've had the talent sometimes, not the coaching. They've had the coaching sometimes and not the talent. They've got to show me that they can do that, Vince. Now, do I think that Notre Dame has the tools to do that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do. But I just they've got to show me first before I'm going to start putting anything more than, a buck on a game.
The love.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
they got to show me a lot.
I do bet, but I never bet more than $5 usually. So like that's where I'm at. And if Notre Dame had really good odds in the preseason about winning the national championship, it was like plus 500 or something crazy. Yeah, I'll put a 5 spot on that because the return, the ROI is really, really good on that if they happen to do it, right? And so, yeah, I'm good. So,
but you're also like I would be. Is you're a small? You'd put like a 10 spot on it, right?
Absolutely.
Like not like a mortgage payment.
No, gosh, no, absolutely not. I wouldn't even put a mortgage payment on it once I found out that they were in the playoff. Okay, because I'm just not that guy. I even if I was super confident, I'm not that guy. So I would not do that. But look, they're going to have every opportunity, and we'll talk about that more as we go. But when you look at the perennial powers, the powerhouses that are usually out there, there's a lot of transition with some of those teams going into next year. Let's go. I mean, why not? Let's have some fun with it. 99 problems, but BK ain't one. Brian, you don't want 3 linebackers on the field at the same time in 23. Is that
if it's the current group of veteran linebackers?
That's what he's saying. Is
by
it?
the way, right?
Yeah, he goes, is that because of the 3 returning linebackers?
Yes,
if
100%.
Notre Dame had 2 of Colley, Sneed, Ziegler, and Junior playing at linebacker plus 1, what say you?
Look, I'll say this: if there comes a time down the road where Notre Dame is a 3-3-5 team, and they have 3 D linemen, and then a Viper that's a Burnham type, and they had a 3-man group of Sneed, Ziegler, and either Drake Bowen or Jaden Osbury or a guy like that, totally fine. Totally fine. Well, I mean, I think Jalen Sneed, if coached correctly, could be a Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah type of rover.
Yes, absolutely.
I do. I think Nolan Ziegler could be that kind of guy.
Sure.
And will they give those? I think they could both play Will. I think Nolan could maybe even potentially be a Mike. I think Drake Bowen could. So it's about the veterans. I'm looking at 2023 and saying there's no way they're going to start Nolan Ziegler, Jaden Osbury, and Jalen Sneed, or Nolan Ziegler, Jalen Sneed, and Drake Bowen. It's just they're not going to do that.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
Prince Colley. They're going to start the younger guys or the veteran, at least 1 or 2 of the veterans. And I don't want to see 3 of those guys in the field together that much. I just don't. Now, there's some nickel looks maybe that I would be okay with that.
Sure.
Where you don't have a Viper on the field. You have 3 bigs and 3 true linebackers. That's okay against, certain spread teams. But I don't want that against Ohio State because they'll run it on you. I don't want that against USC because they'll run it on you, as we saw.
Yeah, we have empirical evidence of that being the case.
Right. So I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that.
Right.
Now, would I be okay if it was that group that, let's just say they didn't have a Viper and it was just 2 big ends and a nose and then Sneed, Ziegler, and Drake or Jaden or something. Totally fine with that. But that's down the road. That's not 2023.
That's not this year.
Right. And my comment was about 2023.
Right.
Which he took. I mean, he said it in 2023. So he took my comment correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree completely. Yeah. Brian, think Hartman putting up similar numbers he had at Wake, but with the Notre Dame logo makes him a Heisman contender?
No. I mean, if we're talking about the numbers he put up in 2021, yeah. Because like this year, for example, Vince, he threw for 3,700 yards and 38 touchdowns and 12 picks, right? He only played 12 games. So let's say he was at Notre Dame, that would be comparable because he only played 12 games. He wouldn't play in a conference
championship, sure.
And then he rushed for 129 yards and a touchdown. That's not Heisman contender numbers unless Notre Dame's ranked number 1.
There it is.
Or number 2. Like they'd have to be like really, really good. Now, if he does what he did in 2021 before the offseason heart issues, and he passes for 4,200 yards, and again, this was over 14 games, But if those were his numbers in a regular season, and also rushed for, because here's what he rushed for, threw for 39 touchdowns. He threw for 38 this year, so comparable. This year he rushed for 1 touchdown. Last year he rushed for 11.
Yeah, big difference.
It'd have to be something like that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, if he can throw for 3,800 yards in the regular season and almost 40 touchdowns, and then have 5 rushing touchdowns, and Notre Dame's undefeated. Yeah,
absolutely. But it's the last part for me that is the kicker.
Correct.
It's not just the Notre Dame logo, because now, granted, if he has that stat line, they're not going to be 8-4. Okay, they're just not.
I'd be shocked.
Right.
Yeah.
But you can't have those numbers be 8-4 and have the Notre Dame, and have Notre Dame on your chest and be a Heisman. You have to be a winning team. I mean, you have to be 11-1 at the worst.
Right.
I think, to be a Heisman contender.
Yeah, because Max Dugan was barely over 3,200 yards and had 6 rushing touchdowns, and what did he have passing 30 passing touchdowns in the regular season, and he was a finalist. Why? Because TC was undefeated in the playoff.
Right, exactly.
That's why.
Exactly.
I'll
go back to what was the season where Ian Book had 16 passing touchdowns and he got votes.
15.
Yeah, there you go.
He was 9th in Heisman.
He got
voting.
votes for the Heisman.
Yes.
So that is
why? Because Notre Dame won the
was
ACC regular season championship. Right.
So if you are having the Notre Dame logo is very important, okay, but you need everything else too.
Right.
So
I actually think the quarterback that would have the best chance to be a Heisman contender over the next couple of years is Tyler Buchner.
Yeah.
Just because he's
dynamic. He's going to have Heisman moments.
Yes. Sam Hartman's going to put up crazy numbers, but I for example, okay, who won the Heisman Trophy this year? Right? It was Caleb Williams. Why? Was he really better than those other quarterbacks? I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. But to me, what he did was he put up really good numbers, right? But his numbers weren't astronomically better than some of the other quarterbacks. But he had really good running numbers. CJ Stroud doesn't. Number 2, he had some really impressive highlight reel, sick plays. I think that's what set it up over the other guys to me. And so I think that is something that Tyler Buchner would do. He would have a lot of those crazy, stuff we saw in the bowl game. Watch this throw by Tyler Buchner.
Right, where he's getting leveled.
Notre Dame win over Ohio State.
Dime to Lindsey. You know what I mean?
Or the one that the Jaden Thomas, which was just
on third down.
The best. I mean, I've seen a quarterback since Jimmy Clausen that can make that kind of play.
Right.
And so, that's kind of where I would be, Vince, is I think he could do that. Sam would just have to put up great numbers, but more so it would be if Notre Dame's ranked in the top 4 and undefeated.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And Sam Hartman's healthy and putting up 3,700 yards and almost 40 touchdowns. Yeah.
The answer
he'll be
is
there.
Yes. Absolutely.
He'll be there.
No
and
question.
Could win it. I mean, he could win it. Because he's going to have some big moment opportunities next year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, the guy that I would put more money on would be if Tyler was the quarterback.
Sure.
Because he's going to make so many insane,
he'll have a highlight reel. Yeah, he'll have a
he
highlight
could be
reel.
I didn't say this correctly. Tyler could be that guy if Notre Dame's 10-2 is what I'm trying to say. Tyler could be a Heisman contender at Notre Dame even if they're not a playoff team because of the highlight stuff. Right. Is my point. And that's why I drew the Caleb Williams comparison, because he wasn't a Heisman. They didn't make
a playoff guy. Yeah, right.
That's what I'm meaning to say. Sam can get in it and win it if I'm not predicting that. I'm just responding to the question.
Right.
If Notre Dame's an undefeated playoff team.
Right.
I didn't say this. I didn't preface this, so I misled. I'm saying is if Notre Dame's not a playoff team, Tyler's the quarterback that could still be contender for a 10-2 Notre Dame team, because he'd not only put up the passing numbers, but big time rushing numbers. And he just would have every week is just going to have some sort of just nutty, did you see the throw this kid made or the run this kid made type of highlights. And that's what attracts voters.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what I meant to say.
100%. Because they won't watch the games. They'll watch the highlights. I mean, that's just, let's be realistic.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, Brian, when does the position change conversation normally happen? Do you think Marcus Freeman has had the safety conversation with Clarence Lewis?
Don't believe they have. No. Based on the conversation I've had in the last week or two, I don't think that I think that would be more of somebody's going to have to show them, and it's going to have to happen during spring ball.
Yeah.
In my opinion. somebody's going to have to step up in spring ball and say to them, hey, halfway through spring, Chance Tucker's just killing it at corner, or Ryan Barnes is killing it at corner, or Christian Gray is just, dude, he's the next Benjamin Morrison, and everybody's healthy and all that. Then I would say, okay, Clarence, here's the deal. Here's what we want to do. Because in a perfect world for me, I still think I've kind of gone back and forth on this, but where I think I'm settling in is I would actually like to see Xavier Watts and Clarence Lewis be the starting safeties, and then Ramon rotating in.
That's me. That's where I'm at.
So
that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
But, we'll see how that happens. Because right now I've dubbed a starting safety somebody who's not even playing safety. So, we'll see how that transpires. All right. Yeah. Last one, Brian. Let's wrap it up with a super chat from TJ. Thank you very much, TJ. Do you expect any O-linemen to transfer out this year?
I don't really comment on guys that are going to transfer out. That's not my place. I don't want to put that out there unless I know of a guy. I'm trying to think of the right way to answer this. I won't be shocked if a lineman leaves. I'm not going to. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Look, I don't like talking about guys leaving because that's, I don't want guys to leave, but
I'm not going to even
numbers are such.
Like, you have way more inside info than I have, and I'm not saying you have inside info on this.
But I do.
I figured.
Yeah.
Here's what I have to say. As I look at this picture on Josh Lugg's Twitter account, it's a lot of dudes. That's my
5 more.
Right. That's my point. There are only 5 starting spots. 3 of them are locked up for next year. That means only 2 spots are available, and there's a ton of dudes in that picture.
And I'm looking at this list, Vince, and only 3 of those guys are out of eligibility.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Right. So, not even that. Only 2 of them are. I mean, if Jared Patterson wanted to come back, he could. He's not going to, but he could. Right.
But my point is that there are so many of those kids that could play.
Only 2 of those guys are gone. Luggin, Patterson. I said 3. 2.
Yeah.
You're only losing 2 and you're adding 5.
Right.
To Vince, to your point, there's only 2 or 3 walk-ons in that picture, Vince.
Right.
That's the thing. It's like
that's what I'm saying.
It's not like there's 7 walk-on. You know what I mean?
Right. Those kids can go play someplace else. They can go start someplace else. And the writing's on the wall that might not happen at Notre Dame. So, yes, judging by that picture alone, there's going to be some transfers. And I have no inside information.
That kid's pretty good. That kid's pretty good. Yeah.
I have no inside information. But from a numbers standpoint, I mean, I just think that's going to happen. So, anyway.
Agree.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. Guys, we went over 3 hours, and it's because you guys had such good questions.
Yeah, there's some we're passing up, but we got to roll. I mean, we're
right. I've got another show here in 40 minutes. So make sure that you jump in and check out. We're going to do a rapid fire version since it's Friday. Me, Jesse, Sean, the 3 of us, we're going to do a rapid fire edition on Friday. But Mace AK always has our out, and which I really appreciate. Says join the message board, hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell. Share this podcast and leave a 5-star review. Visit the IB store for the best merch. And as always, Brian, go Irish.